Welcome, everybody, to the return of the War Room. This is the OCC pre show. We haven't had it around for the last little while, but we are bringing it back with some of the changes that we are making to the OCC. So, in just under 30 minutes, we are going to have our December OCC, which is, as you can tell, my favorite OCC of the year. So, we're going to have a great time here. We're going to get you up to speed. We're going to go through the bracket. We're going to go through the player profiles, get you up to speed with exactly who will be competing here today. I am your host for all of these shenanigans, Christo. I am joined fresh off of competing in the World Championship, Thanatron. Welcome back to the other side of the microphone. We got Starry and Berto, who are fresh off commentating and casting the World Championship. So we have got an action-packed show, so we're going to get right into the action. We're going to start with the bracket here. Let's go ahead and bring it up and see exactly who is competing today in the December OCC. So there were some slight changes to how we qualify for our OCC clashes. So what we're going to be doing is the first and second player on ladder are qualifying. The next 32 now go into the qualifier. So here you see YuYu qualified first, Corg second, and the other 6 players all made it through the long way into the qualifier. So we're gonna have our first quarterfinal. You've got YuYu taking on Corn Guy, who we got to meet in person in Iceland a couple weeks back. That was a great time. Yao Leu taking on Spoker, Corg going up against HQT, Bezio, and Pilsudski. I'm sure Starry's going to tell me I pronounced that wrong, but those are the 8 players we are going to see, and we're going to go ahead and get to know these players by diving into their player profiles, breaking down the deck lists. We're going to see some slight changes with that as well. So we're actually not going to have a third place match for this OCC. Third and fourth are going to split both the diamonds and the cash prize, $1,500 total prize pool here today. So let's get into our first player here. Let's take a look at YuYu, who came in and qualified first. 71% win rate, 421 matches played, the ever popular Schützen as their favorite card. Starry, any insight into who YuYu is, or do we have a fairly unknown player here qualifying first?
Well, here's what I know about UU. UU recently submitted their English name, which means that they are a recent newcomer to the competitive scene in cards. Whenever a Chinese player reaches this level, they have to submit an English name for us to call them by. But I can tell you that earlier this month, UU was absolutely my ladder nemesis. They were playing a Britain US ramp list with 2 copies of Strafing specifically to target swag decks, and they beat me pretty much every time that I played against them. So I know that they're quite a strong player, and they have a good read of the meta. They definitely know how to counterpick using the right cards, like for example Strafing. But it's really impressive that a newcomer like that comes in first, and with a 71% win rate, that's definitely very impressive. But I'm super excited to get into the decks that they're bringing.
I'm very curious to see if you will be bringing some strafing because I've seen an uncomfortable amount of it on ladder as of late.
Yeah, so their first deck is a US Germany frontline list, which has seen a little bit of fall off since the OCCs, or sorry, since the new expansion. We saw it a lot at Worlds, but I haven't been seeing it a ton on ladder. UU is playing 3 copies of M10 opposed to the half tracks that we kind of saw at World Championships. We saw a kind of split between half tracks and M10s as far as what players preferred. But we see UU playing the Gebirgspioneer, which is a great way to ramp early. A lot of players weren't super keen on this in the World Championships. I talked to Jay King about why he didn't really like this card in the World Championships, and he said that it was because going second, it's not super great, as it can get easily targeted out and killed. But I personally really like the card. I think it gives the extra boost that you really need when you're playing frontline. And otherwise, just seeing really good new cards, like for example, the 20th Panzer Grenadier. Next up, we have a German Soviet high roll list. Now, this has been the absolute terror of ladder lately. There's been 2 variants of the deck going around. There's been the Jet prototype list that plays nearly exclusively even cards. And then there's been the list that looks to play a turn one swag. And this is definitely one of the latter. It's playing 4 copies of that swag. But what this deck really looks to do is you're mulliganing to find 1 copy of War Production, no more, no less. And then usually looking to find a copy of swag or autocanone or some kind of strong turn one play that you can spend 3 credits on, maybe even the 64th Panzer Grenadier. And in combination with the swag, you get to play 101st Infantry Regiment to buff up the swag every time it attacks. You can reduce its operation cost with the Jaeger Regiment and very, very quickly run away with the game, not only dealing damage to your opponent's things and suppressing them, but also finishing off their HQ really quick. I mean, if you're getting +2/+2 every turn on an artillery that gets attacked twice, that's pretty crazy. And then the last deck that we're going to see from YuYu is a Britain-Japan pin list. It is playing a lot of the classics, for example, Suisse. Um, Unfortunately, Type 94 TK is no longer in the game, so uh, YuYu is playing 1 copy of Surprise Attack. But we get to see a really, really strong new card, which is Forced Surrender. Forced Surrender is absolutely crazy because you can play Suisse on usually 3 units in your opponent's support line, and then if they have 1 unit on the other side of their HQ that didn't get pinned by the Suisse, you can use your force surrender on that, and you get 2 turns to do whatever you want in this deck, which is absolutely insane. And you'd think, there's not that much healing. You only play 2 copies of honey. You're not playing any fortifications. So Commonwealth, you know, are you really going to be able to get there? And the answer is sometimes you don't. And that's actually okay. Believe it or not, just with the Suisses and the Sexton and the Wellington, you can actually do quite a lot of damage over time. And you buy yourself so much time with this deck that sometimes that's just enough. But definitely super curious to see how this deck plays out. I love that they are replacing the Welsh cards with the 20th Infantry Regiment, and you can use that in combination with Stiff Upper Lip to go turn 1 guard into turn 2 Stiff Upper Lip. Super excited to see this deck play out.
I'm really curious to see how this one is going to play out in the open decklist format, because I've definitely faced it once or twice on ladder, and when you don't exactly know what's coming, it can be a very uncomfortable situation where you are just sitting there and you can't do anything turn after turn. So we'll see when players know what's coming. They will, of course, get 1 ban as well in this first matchup, so maybe we won't see that one happen. We'll have to find out. So YuYu's opponent is going to be Corn Guy, and let's go ahead and bring up Corn Guy's player profile here. Member of Team Heavy and absolute class act. Look at that photo. 294 games played, 16th in their finish this season on ladder. Went ahead and made it through the qualifiers with a 70% win rate. Just goes to show 70% win rate versus YuYu finishing in first with what, a 71% win rate. Such a close margin here. I would be amiss not to kick this over to Thanatron to tell us a little bit about Corn Guy.
Yeah, rocking his bucket hat in the photo, definitely looking large and in charge. But great stats from Corn Guy. Big rule of skies enjoyer. Unfortunately, Japan Air currently is maybe lower than it's ever been. But great ladder player. Corn Guy always someone that you don't want to just absolutely or randomly kind of run into, and has been really working ladder for the last 2 months. Actually was even playing a little bit in Iceland as he was sort of just enjoying himself. So definitely a player who is always right around that ladder and always looking for opportunities to climb it.
Also confirmed his participation in the qualification series in person with Mark Theus by recording it as well. So a Corn Guy leaving nothing up to chance, took that recording, made sure that he was absolutely confirmed to qualify, and sure enough, he did. So Thanatron, let's go through Corn Guy's 3 lists here.
So really interesting lists here from Corn Guy. The first thing we see here is one of the first attempts at really running this new 3 op cost US ramp sort of archetype that we have with the Terribles coming into play now as a new card. He has been playing this on ladder to some pretty good effect, and actually brought it in the OCC Clash quals where it performed pretty well for him. It is a ramp deck, right? So you are trying to get those extra credits early. A lot of them are going to come from this new 332nd Engineer Regiment. Uh, it is, or I'm sorry, no, that is the classic milk truck. It is the 13th Engineer Battalion, the new elite engineer. Every time 3 or more op cost unit is played, you're going to get yourself a fancy new credit slot. And then Terribles have that same, except they're going to generate you a draw off of 3 op cost. So he's going to come with some bigger, slower units, but those bigger, slower units are going to allow him to draw more cards, ramp to more credits, and then get to the back end of his deck where you see these big Halifaxes, these big bombers, this high altitude bombing, this untargetable B-17, really, really high powered stuff that, you know, if he comes early with it, there's not really going to be an answer. And then, of course, not an entire set, but 3 Glamour Boys to hopefully keep those jets away, keep that HQ total nice and high so that he doesn't have to worry about how hard the aggro decks are coming for him. And, you know, believe me today, I think that they will be coming for him. And then next we see a pin list. We see the second pin list. Really interesting that Korn is going against YuYu in this first match. We have a chance at a pin mirror. I have no idea if we'll see it, but we haven't seen a lot of pin. I don't think we saw a lot of it in the qualifiers coming up either. So really interesting to see. The newest card for this is going to be that Forced Surrender coming out in the new expansion. Forced Surrender is super powerful. Leaving all the units that are currently pinned for an entire another turn of pin, and also producing that one pin itself. So when played in conjunction with the Suisse, you can get those 3 units that are grouped together, and that one stickler unit that isn't grouped together, you have your Forced Surrender for that to not only pin it, but then control the board for an entire additional turn with all of that being pinned as well. And then for the third deck here, what we see is very, at this point, classic now jet prototype. This is the classic evens deck. You can see in the deck list we've got no odd cards except for a single Noxshib, which is very interesting. Some players are running a couple more odd cards. We've seen Yag Bomber in at 5. We've seen Auto Cannon in at 3 in this deck, just as some extra firepower. But Korn kind of running it slim with only the Noxshib, everything else even. And obviously, this deck is trying to ramp into that jet prototype and holding a lot of duresses, the new 0-cost suppression, so that it can effectively ignore guards. Things like Glamour Boys are a little difficult. They're going to come down. They're going to provide health. But that guard ability is probably going to go by the wayside as duress comes into play.
Thank you so much, Thanatron. Let's go ahead and dive into our next competitor here, Yao Leu, who is in here and has gone through the qualifiers, finishing 25th in the season, 68% win rate, 449 total matches. Just telling you to keep it quiet. He's maybe a bit of a newcomer here. Don't wanna get his name out there all too much. Berto, do we know anything about Yao Leu, or are we right in saying that this is a fairly newer individual on the competitive scene?
Yeah, I believe they're brand new. I haven't seen them in any other tournament before. I haven't really even seen them much on ladder, so I would say this is definitely a new face.
Players sneaking in here, so let's go ahead and bring up their deck lineup, and Berto, go ahead and take us through what they are packing here today.
Right, so we see another one of this Jur US jet prototype list, so I won't spend too long on that. Thanatron did a great job covering the idea behind that deck. Next up, we have a very interesting deck. We have a Soviet Finland sort of control going on here, with 2 copies of 52K, maybe looking to target those jet prototypes. And finally, we have another one of these pin decks. I haven't seen a lot of pin on ladder. I'm surprised to see so much of it in this tournament.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. So gonna have to see if we end up with some of those mirror matchups, or we end up with Pin being banned, just being a pain in the butt to deal with. Let's go ahead and look at Yao Leu's opponent in our second quarter final here. We have Spoker, who used to go by the name Share the Theory. We've definitely seen this individual before. I remember that photo all too well. 939 matches played, so doubling up on what we've seen most of the other competitors play. Similar win rate, though, right hovering around that 70 mark, finishing 20th. Starry, anything you'd like to add around Spoker slash Share the Theory?
Yeah, Spoker was one of the three main players that won the Nations Cup, and I think that as me and Berto were both participants in that, that was an absolutely fantastic accomplishment. I've gotten actually a chance over the past couple weeks since World Championships to sort of befriend Spoker. He's definitely a cool guy, but very respectful, and definitely glad to see him competing today.
Awesome. Let's get into their deck lineup here as I'll have Starry continue to take us through it.
Yeah, so the first deck list is a another high roll list, another Germany Soviet high roll list. And as I was talking about earlier, there's the versions that run Swag, and there's the versions that run Jet Prototype. And this is one of the ones that runs Jet Prototype. There's actually some crazy stuff going on here. Spoker is playing two copies of Line of Engagement, which is the token card. um, I'm very confused about this, but just getting to get that front line early on turn two, especially if you don't necessarily get to high roll with the war production, seems like it could be a really interesting choice. But you got to be careful because war production will, of course, discard that line of engagement when you play it. So a little bit interesting version of the Jet prototype version of the high roll list. The next one is a Soviet Britain push OTK sort of anti-aggro list. And it's looking to win, of course, with push in combination with Red Dawn, and then Great Patriotic War, allowing you to deal all of that damage to your opponent's HQ. But until you get a chance to do that, you're really just going to be preventing your opponent from doing a whole lot, using a lot of anti-aggro techniques, just cards like Brionsk Regulars, stuff like that. And then the last deck is another push OTK list, yeah, this time a Britain Soviet push OTK list. And it's playing a copy of Special Reinforcements, which I think is really interesting. That, of course, is the card that allows you to get another copy of the last card, the last unit that died under your control. So I'm curious to see what that is going to be used for, as they're really only playing one copy of Honey and one copy of Pioneer, and two copies of Crusader. So definitely a very weird card to see in this list, but maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you have to keep that 85th Pioneer Company for the push OTK. But yeah, very, very interesting deck lists.
Surprised we haven't seen more push, considering J King had some success with it during the World Championships, but there's at least two of them coming from Spoker, so we'll have to see how this plays out. Now let's move into our third quarterfinal. We have fan favorite Corg, who came in, finished second in the season, so automatically qualified. Same principle, those 400-ish matches, 73% win rate, doing a very, very nice job. Thanatron, anything you would like to add when it comes to Corg?
I don't really know what I could add that hasn't been added already, right? He basically came up like a young prodigy, shot out of nowhere and has never left the scene since. He's a guy that has brought certain cards that were overlooked into the meta, kind of by himself. Things like Welsh guards, which just weren't played before until he found a way to work them in very effectively as protectors in some of the original pin decks that we saw maybe before this patch. So super accomplished player, always really exciting to watch, and definitely one of our favorites, I think, as far as just a player who is accomplishing more and more as we move forward.
I absolutely think one of the highlights from last year's December OCC was Ollie screaming Korg over and over into my ear holes. So, Thanatron, take us through what Korg is bringing here today.
So the first thing we see is a great big old Soviet deck. You can see that this thing goes pretty heavy. We go all the way down to things like Winter Offensive and ISU for that board clear. We have the new Corsun, which is extremely strong. And then, of course, we have Push OTK in here as well. So this is more a bit more of a control-heavy push deck than maybe some of the more British varieties. We just saw a deck list using push where there was barely any units. Now we can see obviously a much more unit heavy deck, hoping to basically control the board and control the game until they can pull that push combo off, or maybe even use the push combo just as sort of a smaller killing blow around sort of all the other things they have here. They have a lot of draw with things like Buy the Sword and Scouting Party, and then obviously, like I said, some really big units to get to. So very interesting. Can't wait to see that. Next up, we see a Brit US deck, which looks like just some real classic ramp here. We got War Machines and In Hour of Need, just some real basic ramp cards that were taken from the US. And then we see the two big tech calls here, right? We see the two strafings. Those are going to be particularly for the swags that come down. Maybe on turn one, he has that answer. And if they come down any later, of course, he has that answer. And the two production orders, we've seen a lot of the J Bomber from production order wreaking havoc on ladder and everywhere else. It is a mass AoE suppress, which is incredible. And also it is a 10 cost blitz bomber. So nothing to shake a stick at there. Lastly, we have the same jet prototype that we've seen all over ladder and all over this tournament. We should see for some tournaments to come here, I would reckon. Once again, almost all even cost cards. We do see a Yag Bomber teched in, and we do see a Noxhab as his two odd choices. Odd meaning odd credit cost, not odd as in that they are strange. But just those two odd cards that will not help Jet out as far as buffs, but the Jet probably doesn't need it. And again, that is a list that we will see plenty of.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thanatron. Let's go ahead and look at Corg's opponent in our third quarterfinal. We have HQT in ceremonial garb. It seems 277 matches, 70% win rate, finishing 19th, making it through the qualifier. Really interesting to see the number of players who are maybe a little bit lower on that ladder, right? We haven't seen so far players, whatever, 4, 5, 6. Those aren't the ones qualifying here through that longer process. It seems to be the 19s, the 20s. Those are the folks who are making it through, Berto. Who is HQT?
HQT is a very strong player, legend on ladder. I mean, they don't have too many games, but the games I've played against them, they've always been hard fought. And I see a little bit of a throwback with that HMS Illustrious as the favorite card, maybe reminiscing of the good old Brit Air days,
Let's
as
go.
HQT has been around for a while.
Let's go ahead and see if they did sneak any kind of Brit Air into their lineup, and sadly, no.
Of course not. But they do have tokens here. I believe this is the first time we're seeing tokens today. Very powerful deck with the new Baron of Vichy and Line of Engagement. Two cards that can really get tokens out of hand in a hurry. And it is certainly a deck to be reckoned with. I'm sure we've all seen a lot of it on ladder. Next up, we have this war production sort of high roll deck going for the swag. We've seen it a few times in this tournament already. And finally, we have Jagro with 2 copies of the swags as well, 2 copies of 20 Panzer Grenadiers, 2 copies of Take Liberty. A lot of new cards have been making their way into this list, and a lot of people thought Jagro might not make it into the next expansion and the rotation list, but here it stands. Maybe not as strong as before, but still resiliently keeping on.
Much like the dinosaurs, Jagro always finds a way. Let's move on to our final quarterfinal. We got Bezio up here first. Let's go ahead and dive into their player card. 516 matches, 71% win rate, 24th season finish. As usual, Starry, I will ask you to pronounce their favorite card in which they have replicated a photo in front of, because I will do it no justice.
Yeah, that is the Polish destroyer, the ORP Błyskawica. I believe it means lightning in Polish. But yeah, it's a really cool card, really cool ship, a lot of historical relevance, and it's now a museum ship in Poland.
Very cool, Bezio, hailing from Poland, I do believe. So let's go ahead and bring up their lineup here. And Starry, you can run us through exactly what we're going to see Bezio with here today.
Yeah, so their first list is another Japan Germany Jagger list, but they're actually playing 4 copies of Swag, maybe potentially inspired by J King. But this list, in my opinion, is a lot more standard as far as Jagger goes, not seeing the crazy stuff like on the Ascent like we were seeing with HQT, but otherwise a very similar deck list. Next, we have a Soviet USA list, and this is going to be tokens. We are going to see, of course, line of engagement and all of the good stuff the tokens is doing, using Industrial Might as a great draw engine. And then last up, we are going to see a Germany Soviet high roll list, and this is going to be a list that does not rely on the evens, choosing instead to go more for the swag lines and allowing you to play really cool cards like the Messerschmitt BF-109G, and Yag Bomber and Swag, of course. But yeah, relying more on the odd cost cards.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Starry. Let's go ahead and look at Bezio's opponent. We have Pilsudski. Actually, before Starry, I let you go. Am I pronouncing that incorrectly? There's like a little line on the L, so I'm going to defer to you for any.
Yeah, that's that L with the line through it makes a W sound, so it would be Piłsudski.
I will do my best, but I make no promises. 191 total matches, 76% win rate, finishing 17th. So, absolutely doing a phenomenal job in going ahead and being as effective as possible for those 191 matches. Let's go ahead and dive into their lineup. Thanatron, I will ask you to go through and break down what this last final competitor is bringing here today.
So first off, we have another tokens deck. Every time that you see Soviet US right now, it is probably going to be tokens. So we see that here again. The kind of interesting or maybe slightly different text, we have a Stars and Stripes, we have an Alliance, as the US cards running those big buffs for the whole board, and hopefully a back clear. But otherwise, we see some pretty standard token stuff, as we've mentioned how good line of engagement is, and then the Corson, that new elite as well, coming down for a heavy discount when you have so many bodies on board, can be really, really great. To move on, we go right into a pretty classic Jagro. We see again 4 swags in this Jagro as well. As I believe Starry mentioned, possibly inspired by J King's World Cup deck, World Championship deck that he brought as well. The 2 honorable deaths are very interesting. Those can take out enemy swags right away, including on turn 1, regardless of the whole war production thing. So definitely a smart choice there. The TK early is another new Japanese card that I think is very good. Obviously screams Jagro when you look at it, so probably in everybody's Jagro today, but definitely worth throwing out. And then lastly, we see another just high roll war production deck. We see a lot of swags here. No jet prototype in this one. This is a just artillery high roll, although there's a lot of non-artillery units. But again, this is that deck that's trying to get the swag out on turn 1, and then set up a system where they are getting the op cost down to 0 with a pincer, and then using the 101 to just make the largest double shooting gun that just basically cannot be removed, that can win them the game single-handedly.
Amazing. Thank you for the breakdown, Thanatron. Thank you to all 3 of our expert panel for doing a phenomenal job getting us up to speed on all the decks we're going to see here today in the December OCC. We're going to go to a quick break, and we will be back with all of the action to find out who will take home the title and the lion's share of the $1,500 prize pool. Welcome, everybody. It is time for the December OCC, my favorite OCC of the year. As you can tell, both Berto and I bring in the holiday cheer. Starry deciding to be the Grinch today. That's okay. We love her anyway. Speaking of that, Starry, your first experience of the World Championships a couple weeks ago. How are you feeling? How did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I mean, that was Berto's first experience as well, and gotta say that was one of the coolest experiences of my life. Definitely super excited that I got to go, and would is already excited to go back.
Love it. I mean, Berto, you kind of experienced it from the player side, but remotely, not physically there. You did the casting on site. Kind of how did that look to you? And having two different roles in two very different scenarios over the past 2 years.
Well, it is a lot different in person, and I'm sure as a player experience, it would have been a lot different if that year that I was playing was in person. Um, but it's hard to be a player. There's a lot of stress on the line. There's a lot of money on the line, um, and that is a hard position to be in. Whereas caster, you get to relax a little bit. You get to lean back in your chair, and you get the same paycheck no matter what happens.
Right on, Berto. So that, of course, was the World Championships. You can catch all the VODs, all the good stuff on Twitch here. That is all behind us, though. We're going to be looking forward into another phenomenal year coming up of KARDS esports. But before we get there, we do have one last piece of business to take care of, and that is this December KARDS OCC. So let's go ahead and see who is competing here as we bring up the bracket. Some minor changes have been made to the qualification process that will be playing out over the next coming year as well. So typically we used to have 6 players. The 6 top players on ladder would qualify for the OCC. We've changed it up. So what's actually going to happen is you're going to have your top 2 players qualify on ladder. In this case, we have YuYu and Corg qualifying. And then the next 32 will battle it out in those qualifiers to see who will play in the top 8. So here you have exactly that top 8 here. You've got YuYu taking on Corn Guy in our first feature quarterfinal. We have Yao Leu taking on Spoker in our second quarterfinal. Corg versus HQT, which will be the other quarterfinal that will be cast live here on stream. And then we have Bezio taking on Pisudski in our last quarterfinal. The prize pool will also be slightly adjusted. It is still a $1,500 prize pool, 750 USD for first place, 450 for second, and then third and fourth will actually split what the typical prize pools were. So that's a mix of diamonds and cash. 150 USD for each, 375 diamonds for each, so there will be no third place game. So some minor tweaks going on here as we get into the new KARDS season. But let's quickly dive into our first 2 players and their deck lineups. We did have the return of the pre-show today as well, so we got an in-depth breakdown of both players' decks in the War Room. You can catch that as well on demand. But just to give you a quick little peek, so you are up to speed. Starry, what is YuYu bringing here?
So YuYu is bringing a frontline list that is playing 3 copies of the M10A1, which is, of course, the deploy suppress a unit. And this card, for YuYu at least, has kind of replaced the um, half track.
Half track.
Yes, the half track, as a way of dealing with tricky guard units or other units that could prevent you from winning the game. Then we have a war production list, which is looking to play ideally a turn 1 swag, or potentially a turn 1 64th Panzer Grenadiers, but either way, looking to high roll your opponent, looking to smash them in the face really early and play a threat that they just can't deal with. And then lastly, we have the British Japan pin list, and it's playing a lot of really new strong cards, but preventing your opponents from ideally even getting out of the support line and then finishing them off either with damage over time or with Commonwealth.
Awesome. Thank you for the breakdown. Let's go spin it over to the other side and take a look at Corn Guy's lineup here. Berto, why don't you take us through this quickly?
Right, so Corn Guy has a credit cost matters deck first up, and then they have a pin deck, and finally they have the even cost jet prototype US minor ramp list.
Perfect. The bans are in, so let's go ahead and dive into the bans. Of course, this is a conquest format. One deck gets banned, the other two must win to make it through. So YuYu is going to lose that Germany Soviet kind of high roll list. It can be very, very explosive if it manages to get going. And Korngai losing the Brit Japan pin list. Let's start by talking about this pin list, Berto. And you had talked about it a bit on the pre-show that we haven't seen a whole heck of a lot of it, but it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to play against when you do see it. Is that one of the main reasons you think this is kind of eating the ban here in this first matchup?
Yeah, so I feel like the pin list, it's interesting because it can struggle a little more against tanks and things like Comet. Um, so there's a lot of that in the most popular deck on ladder right now, which is the sort of Germany Soviet high roll deck. And so I think it makes sense to see it a little more in tournament than on ladder, just because it does a lot better into things like tokens, even Alpine. It's really strong against. So after thinking about it a little more, I think it makes a lot of sense to see it here.
Well, let's get
And
into it. This is our first quarterfinal.
Corn guy coming in strong, using the supply shortage to take out that Geberg's Pioneer, and we see the reason why some players don't really love Geberg's Pioneer is because it's really easy to take out. But if that Geberg's Pioneer sticks around, it is a really, really strong credit engine. It's a war machine at half cost. So yeah, I mean it has the potential to be strong, but it is a little bit frail, and Corn guy just spending that board wipe to take it out.
Yeah, which leaves this 20-second uncontested in the back line for a few turns, which is something you never want to see if you're Corn guy here. Of course, it's always really scary to have your opponent drawing all those cards for free.
Yeah, and Corn Guy is probably gonna have to keep up this counter strike, but in doing so, oh wow, instead going for the war bonds, very surprising. Saying that, I'm okay with that PIR. I'm just gonna worry about ramping for the moment.
Well, if Corn guy can find a supply priorities off of this extra draw from the war bonds, that would be huge. My fear about holding up the counter strike is it is open deck lists, and YuYu does have that Greyhound to check for it.
Yeah, it's only turn 5, and Corn Guy is already really close to just having the game over. And now we're gonna see that counter strike come out from Corn Guy.
Yeah, if you use diligent, he checks the deck lists, he'll know how to play around it and take the
And there
game
we go. Wow,
on
a
turn
quick
6.
victory from YuYu. Oh my gosh. That was one of the fastest card games I've seen in an OCC. Both players just blitzing out cards from their hand.
Yeah, we saw no turn timer in this one. That was quick, but Corn guy needs to be careful not to get uh rocked off his feet too quick. But I'm sure he'll be able to put his head down for the next match and power through, not let that match affect him too much.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit confused here. I think we might not have the right nations up as far as what each player is bringing, because YuYu of course just brought a US list. Um, but yeah, I definitely was surprised. I was curious to see what was going to happen with the Terrible. That card is a card that I frankly didn't think was OCC playable, but definitely really interesting to see it come out of Corn Guy. What do you think about Terrible, Berto?
I've seen it get a ton of value, but it is a slow engine. It doesn't do a lot in the early game because you really don't want to spend Gree to attack with it. But if you are able to get these draws off of it, you can really quickly you get an engine going where you're getting draws. If you have the other card, you're getting credits as well. And it can get out of hand real quick, but you're not dealing with your opponent's board while you're doing that. So you need a few turns to just not die, and PIR is really good at beating you down quickly.
Yeah, and the joke about PIR is, of course, how selfish it is and how it always buffs itself. But yeah, it buffed all of the units that YuYu was able to push with quickly. That 20-second and the PIR itself, it buffed the 20-second 2 times and then also buffed the PIR 2 times. And wow, I mean, it's really difficult if you're Corn Guy to prevent something like that. On one hand, maybe Corn Guy could have saved the supply priorities and it would have had an answer for the 22nd. But on the other hand, if you didn't take out that Gebirgspioneer, would you have really prevented yourself from dying any sooner? As you know, if your opponent has an extra credit every turn, that is just going to allow them to take you out sooner. So I don't know. It's really hard to make those key decisions when you're playing at this level, but those key decisions are oftentimes what decides the game.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, looking at the hands, you can say it would have been better for Corn Guy not to rip that supply priorities on turn 1, but I think if I'm put in Corn Guy's shoes, every time I'm playing that supply priorities to get rid of that Gebirgs Pioneer turn 1.
Yeah, and so now we're going to see the pin into the ramp list. And this one, I think, gives ramp a much better shot. Of course, the thing that I am worried about in this matchup is that Commonwealth could potentially come out. If you're an aggro list and you can pressure your opponent's HQ, then it is pretty difficult to get the Commonwealth off for YuYu. But if you're playing ramp and not pressuring your opponent very much at all, then Commonwealth suddenly becomes a big threat.
Yeah, and Corn Guy doesn't have a lot of defense gain in this deck. He has the Victory March, which could be absolutely massive, and he has 3 copies of the Glamour Boys. So I think those will be really key cards in getting above the Commonwealth. And then we will have to see how much damage YuYu is able to get out of his Suisses and out of his Wellingtons.
Yeah, and Corn Guy does have the milk trucks as well, which is only incidental. It's only 2 per card, but 6 over the course of the game is definitely something that is worth paying attention to as well. But YuYu already has the Commonwealth, already has this Crusader Honey engine going, and Corn Guy's hand, Corn Guy missed out on being able to play that enemy spotted, which means that it's kind of just gonna stick around unless Corn Guy can manage to wipe out the front line. And nothing that he has immediately makes me think that he's gonna be able to do that.
Well, he just found the Monsoon Rot, so I wouldn't be surprised to see the Monsoon Rot supply priorities to clear.
Oh, true. Yeah. This is, of course, way, way more cheap than the classic monsoon rot supply shortage that we've seen in metas previously. I've definitely been seeing a lot more monsoon rot plus either winter warfare or supply priorities. Getting to board wipe for 7 instead of 9 is such a huge difference.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I did also try to work on a Winter Warfare Monsoon Rot deck back before the expansion dropped, and it can be hard to build these sorts of lists. You have so many options when you're building control lists that it can be a little confusing at times what you want to put into your deck.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, but we might see from YuYu the reason why they are playing this 20th Infantry, which is to draw 2 off of the stiff upper lip. Stiff Upper Lip is another one of those cards that I didn't really think was going to be playable, but we've seen it a lot in Soviet Britain lists and Britain Soviet lists, these guard spam anti-aggro lists. And with the inclusion of Glamour Boys in this meta, I think we're going to continue to see it for at least a good while.
Yeah, one thing about all that draw for YuYu is that they are having a little bit of issues with hand size. They're maybe getting forced to run out some Suisse's for not a lot of value, making them more vulnerable to Corn Guy's board clears as well. It's creating a few awkward situations here for YuYu.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that the main thing for YuYu is the draw. It's always difficult when you're playing a deck where you don't really want to overdraw any particular card to manage your draw. But as far as the pins go, I mean, ramp doesn't really play a whole lot of things that you need to worry about pinning in the first place. So I don't think it's the end of the world if you burn something like Enable Power earlier in the game. But you're absolutely right that it means that you're not going to be able to pin something like a B17 or a Halifax later in the game. If you had to choose one player to say, this player is favored right now, which player do you think is more likely to see victory in this game?
Well, it looks awkward for Corn Guy. So much of his draw in this deck is reliant on his 2 enemy spotteds, and it's questionable if YuYu is ever going to take the front line back this game. So
I kind of doubt it, to be perfectly honest. I
yeah,
would be very surprised.
so right now I would probably be putting my money on YuYu if I had to choose.
Yeah, I think so too. And we're gonna see this hit the Pioneer, which, yes, you're not taking your opponent off of Commonwealth, but if your opponent doesn't pin, whatever you have, then you're gonna be able to clap back with those milk trucks for a juicy 2 damage and put them below Commonwealth range.
Now, this air defense, it helps protect your Halifax, but at the same time, it means you're not going to have it around for the Wellington later in the game, which is such a potent damage source. So
Yeah,
that's a little scary.
and we see what I was talking about when we were going over deck preview, which is that if you can get three units on one side of the HQ and 1 unit on the other, you can use this Suisse Force Surrender combo to essentially take 2 extra turns. I mean, functionally. In a deck like Pin, you're just really taking 2 extra turns, and that means that by the time that Corn Guy gets to attack again, YuYu's going to be at 10 credits, which is concerningly close to that important 12 credit mark.
Yeah, Corn Guy, he does have the option to, use the supply priorities and actually kill one of his own units, which is pretty helpful, because you're able to deploy something that isn't pinned for 2 turns.
Yeah, and you're able to place it on the other side of the HQ if you want, which makes it much harder for YuYu to pin everything all in one go. But Corn Guy instead deciding to keep everything in hand. I'm curious to see how this Victory March is going to play out. It's a card that I was pretty surprised by, but in this key matchup, it might gain potentially somewhere between 6 and 10 HQ defense, which could be really important in fending off that Commonwealth.
I have been absolutely been blown out by Victory March. Like, to heal 15 off of it is not impossible. It's terrifying, and I'm sure YuYu is palpably aware of the power of that card in this matchup.
Oh man, and Corn Guy is starting to make the comeback here. Getting rid of your opponent's Crusader's draw engine, important. Getting rid of the guard on the 20th Infantry means that what it was designed to do, in combination with that stiff upper lip, is no longer going to work. And that Halifax is getting the hit on the HQ. Corn Guy really just managed to turn it around in just one play.
Yeah, and YuYu doesn't have a lot of HQ defense gain in the stack. As I was saying before, you got a lot of little bits of defense gain all over the deck with the naval power, with the AA barrage, all giving, nice little boosts. And of course, the two honeys are able to potentially give you a lot. But at the same time, they are also, sometimes not getting you a lot of value either.
Yeah, and YuYu able to stop Corn Guy for 2 turns, but as far as follow-up, YuYu pretty much doesn't have anything. I mean, you can Wellington and then AA barrage your Wellington and might be able to hit in for some damage, and you are going to challenge Corn Guy to say, hey, you got to deal with this Wellington sooner rather than later. But if Corn Guy can manage to do it, then what does YuYu really have after that? Those two delaying tactics are going to do nothing against that bomber, and it doesn't look like YuYu's going to be able to Commonwealth for 20 this game, unless something absolutely crazy happens. But I guess it's really a question of, is Corn Guy going to be able to answer this Wellington?
Yeah, and will YuYu keep up the pin to be able to prevent Corn Guy from moving up these one operation cost units, getting down a Jasco, and getting off this victory march?
Yeah, so
For
YuYu is going to need 2 pin cards, as well as hoping that your opponent doesn't have any removal. But if they're able to do that, then they are going to find a way to win this game. And Corn Guy doesn't draw the removal that he needs. But you will be able to at least take out the Suisei with his Pathfinders if that's what he decides to go for.
um yeah, and I think he might just be going for big healing.
I'm really surprised about this. I was thinking that we were gonna see. Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus
Oh my
16.
gosh. Victory March coming out for an absolutely crazy amount of HQ defense. I was really confused. You saw it well before I did. But oh my gosh, Victory March coming in absolutely clutch right now. And now
Now
YuYu's presented with a huge problem.
he can deal with this front line with the retreat in his hand. But, you know, um, this pin deck, it only runs temporary solutions, really. So you're on the timer. Even though you're able to, like, take all these turns, it can be really difficult to get the value you need, even when you have, like, 4 uncontested turns in a row.
Yeah, and YuYu is running out of cards, and I'm not sure that YuYu is going to have enough answers left to buy them the time that they need to deal enough damage to the HQ, even if they did have, like, their entire deck in their hand. Even if YuYu had their entire deck in their hand, I don't know if there would be enough pin cards in there to buy them the time that they need.
Now, this is a bit of an interesting spot. You're removing the effect on the Sexton, so it's not as important to destroy. But if you want to play this Mitchell, you want to destroy the Sexton first. So I think Corn Guy went for a smart play here.
Yeah, unfortunately, Corn Guy didn't hit the Wellington that they were hoping for, which maybe gives YuYu a way to continue to hit either the HQ or their opponent's units, but I don't think it's going to be enough for YuYu, unfortunately.
Yeah, they really need some pin, and they barely even have cards.
Yeah, the AA barrages will allow YuYu to kind of play sneaky breaky with that Wellington, allowing it to not be on the board during your opponent's turns. But what are you gonna do about the roughly 30 damage that you're staring down from your opponent's bombers plus the 5th ranger?
Yeah, and a little unlucky finding that AA Barrage is at the end of the deck after all your Suseis are gone, but that's how the cookie crumbles, and YuYu going for
Oh
A
man.
bit of a Hail Mary.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure if it was over for YuYu. Oh, you know what? No, because those bombers had blitz. Yeah, it was in fact over for YuYu. But
Yeah.
if those bombers didn't have blitz, then YuYu actually had a strong possibility of playing Commonwealth on the next turn. And now we're going to
Yeah.
go into a final game 3, and Corn Guy is bringing that jet prototype ramp list, I think. And YuYu is going to have to try and beat it with Pin, which is going to be an absolute challenge for YuYu. I mean, having 6 to 7 damage, almost always 7 damage, but 6 to 7 damage coming down from Corn Guy that immediately is going to hit HQ is, I mean, what are you gonna do against that?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it work out in Pin's favor before, but it is hard. Um, a big part of it can sometimes come down to the comet, although UU does have these 20th infantry, are they called?
Yep,
The one cost 2/2 guard for Japan, which is able to block comet if he's not forced to use them all early game to protect himself.
yeah.
And
It's
of course,
also it's also possible that the jet prototypes remove the other jet prototypes and the comet from your deck, in which case, you know, you could low roll with the high roll deck and uh, run into problems that way. But yeah, I think you're right that a careful use of guards is going to be really important for YuYu to come out of this.
yeah, I spoke a little bit about the matchup before and how I like the high roll deck into the pin matchup, but at the same time, I should say that my pin list it doesn't run the 20th infantries for the guard, and I think that'll make a big difference in this final match.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that Porn Guy, with the list that the list that they brought, that banning this jet prototype was really clever. Being able to rely on your opponent's slower decks to kind of take advantage of that ramp and hit your opponent with. I mean, your jet prototype is using a lot of ramp cards, and your Britain list is using, or sorry, not your Britain list, your US list is using a lot of ramp cards. And so, yeah, this is the power of the ban in competitive formats, right? I mean, it completely shapes the metagame in really unique ways, allowing decks that might otherwise not be super strong on ladder to excel in this environment.
Absolutely. Now let's take a look at these mulligans. Uh, Pretty decent start for Corn Guy. I'd be thinking about keeping this duress for something like Engineers, but at the same time, it's mainly one card you're looking to duress in your opponent's deck, so it's kind of hard to keep at the same time.
Yeah, there is a Nashab. I'm not sure how useful it is in this matchup, but it does mean that it's one odd cost card less to hit with your jet prototypes later into the game. And Corn Guy
Yeah,
isn't even going to drop it this turn. Not even going to drop the 64th.
well, this prevents UU from being able to pin the 64th, and if all you're doing is moving up 64th next turn, then I suppose it makes sense to remove that option for UU.
Yeah, although something that does come to my mind is if you're Corn Guy and you're not going to play 64th on turn 2, then I'm kind of surprised to not see a harder mulligan for something like War Machine. What do you think? I mean, am I crazy?
Well, I think maybe Corn Guy recognized that UU doesn't really have good early answers for the 64th Grenadiers. Using just a delaying tactics to send it back because he doesn't have any ways to really kill it in the deck. So I think forcing this sort of these temporary solutions from UU, I think that reduces the tools that UU will have for later in the game. So I think it's smart to keep.
Yeah, and Corn Guy isn't playing this Noshib because if you have Noshib down, it makes your support line much easier to pin. We can tell that Corn Guy has practiced this matchup in preparation for today because he's playing in a way that I would definitely call unorthodox. I don't know about you, but the plays that Corn Guy is making are definitely not plays that you would see in other matchups against decks other than Pin.
Yeah, pin really warps how you have to play the game. You don't just want to dump as many units as you possibly can because that makes you weaker into delaying tactics. It makes you weaker into Suisse. And this match can still come down to Corn Guy finds a comet, and does he have the fourth support line spot, or does he not? Because I've seen it that you have the comet in hand, but they keep pinning your whole back line, and it's a rough when that happens.
Yeah, I'm super fascinated by how Corn Guy is playing this. I definitely agree that the Pioneer is going to be a much larger problem as the game continues than a guard that can be pretty easily taken care of. But at the same time, you could just arrest the Pioneer when you draw one, and that is essentially the same as just killing it. Um, but you know, killing it earlier rather than later is definitely important, as it means that YuYu isn't going to be able to go for playing like Convoy into stiff upper lip and just drawing like crazy.
Now this seems surprising to me from YuYu, because YuYu, he has intel on these cards. He knows that Corn Guy is going to be able to immediately clear the Sexton.
True. However, if Corn Guy goes for this play, it is pretty weak to Suisse. Against Pin, it's really nice to be able to attack both with units in the support line and with units in the front line. But the support line units in Corn Guy's deck are these 6-cost fighters that aren't going to come down until pretty late in the game. So we're just going to see YuYu come out with a pin here and slow Corn Guy down pretty significantly. Corn Guy has the option to retaliate with a Jet prototype, but YuYu could pretty easily kill it with a Wellington, and if you get unlucky with those Jet prototype um, uh, mills, if you remove the other Jet prototypes from your deck, then you might run into some problems, but I still think that you'd probably be pretty favored as Corn Guy here.
Well, also if you play the Jet prototype, that's 4 units. That means that YuYu can delaying tactics, get Gree units on the same side, and then start playing Susei and another pin on the 4th unit, and then that's uh, suddenly a big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you in the know of how delaying tactics retreats units? Is there any rhyme or reason to it, or is it random?
Yes, there is. So if you delaying tactics here, the 64th Panzer Grenadiers and the 20th Panzer Grenadiers will both go to the left side, and the 35T will go to the right, because that is how they are lined up relative to
I
the HQ.
see, I see, I see. So what about in a position where there's the same number of cards in the front line and in the back line? Does it then become like a 50-50?
Um, I believe that is random, but I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, but if
That,
if they kind of line up jagged like that,
yeah,
by being a different number of cards in the front line and the support line, then it is, you know, it 100% for a fact how they're gonna line up. All right,
yeah.
that's great to know. I'm, I'm very glad that I'm learning. Yeah, so YuYu is gonna be able to pin everything, but without the force surrender, you're not gonna be able to get the full value out of this. And
Yeah.
I'm expecting just a Bismarck from Corn Guy here, right?
Yeah, for sure. You're never getting more value than 7 damage. Uh, your opponent doesn't run Ultra, they don't have Greek credits up anyways, so why not?
Yeah, and Corn Guy was hovering over his own HQ there for a second, and man, you really hope that your finger doesn't slip off the left click button when you're doing that. Bismarck does say target HQ and not the enemy HQ, so
Yeah, it, it can be scary to watch some people play sometimes. Some people they aren't scared of that sort of thing. Maybe it's never happened to them before, but once in a while, there's always a chance.
yep, for sure. And when there's a lot of money on the line, I don't know if I'd be comfortable taking that risk personally, but YuYu is doing an absolutely excellent job of crowd controlling Corn Guy here. Corn Guy is sitting at 8 cards in hand, and soon is going to start overdrawing if YuYu is able to continuously pin. And YuYu getting that Crusader is huge. It means that YuYu is going to be able to play the Suisse, play the Crusader, and then Naval Power the last card that isn't pinned, drawing a card, then suddenly your stiff upper lip is drawing for 2 even without a guard unit. And if you can find a guard unit, then it's actually drawing for 3. And YuYu seems to have a nearly endless supply of units if they so, or sorry, of cards if they so choose. But instead, playing around the duress, I suppose. Do you think that that's the logic that they were employing when not playing the Crusader?
Yeah, I suppose that has to be the thing that they were thinking about, and works out for you as that is exactly what Corn Guy just found.
So if YuYu plays Crusader and Honey and Stiff Upper Lip, that's going to be 7 credits, meaning that they would have to find a 1 credit pin, of which I believe they maybe have 4 left, 4 or 5. Oh, and
Also,
that's the one that you want to find, that forced surrender right there.
even if you didn't find a 1 credit pin, you're able to pin these left 3 units, and then this infantry is forced to attack into the front line, and then it can't move. So
True,
it
true.
wouldn't have been the end of the world if they didn't find something.
Yeah, an absolutely astute observation, Mr. Berto. Um, but yeah, if Corn Guy doesn't duress this honey, then YuYu is gonna quickly approach Commonwealth territory, and so Corn Guy is gonna duress YuYu's honey. But YuYu finds another honey and an able power. This is going to be pretty dangerous territory for Corn Guy here, and frankly, there isn't a whole lot of counterplay that you can do. You kind of just have to sit and pray, hoping that your opponent doesn't get there.
Victory or death. You hate to see it.
And that's gonna be it. We are gonna see this pin list take home a victory, and I'm curious if that is foreshadowing, as we see so many pin lists in this tournament. I'm curious to
Yeah,
see if pin is gonna be the new tournament meta.
it's a powerful list. Unfortunate for Corn Guy there. YuYu, it looked like he might brick on his draw for a little bit, but then he found a convoy into a Crusader, and I think that was the beginning of the end there in that
Oh,
last match.
absolutely.
And I'm curious as well. And Starry, I'll ask you. We saw Corn Guy kind of, and he played the beginning of the game very carefully, knowing he's going up against Pin, but he also missed the war production, so didn't quite get that explosive start that he would have wanted. Do you think being able to get a bit more burst early on would have kind of changed the game and forced you to play a different line?
To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have experience with this matchup, and Corn Guy clearly does by the way that he was playing. But my question is, if you do play War Machine, what are you bursting into? You can play that jet prototype, but if you get that jet prototype killed or pinned or something like that, then it could potentially be a downside just as much as it's an upside. So it's kind of hard to say. I would kind of defer this question to Berto.
um, well, I feel like the War Machine isn't quite as impactful in this matchup as a lot of other ones, Pin really just slows the game down so much that having your cards coming out a turn early uh, sometimes isn't the biggest deal in the world. I think that one of the biggest things was just not finding that comet from Corn Guy, because if he had that comet, he wouldn't be playing that FW. He would be killing Suseis, dealing 4 damage every turn, and never ever going up to 4 cards on the board.
And I'm also curious, and Berto, we can continue on with you. You know, we talked, you mentioned as this pin deck won a fairly convincing game. How difficult is the deck to play? Like, I feel like we saw you played exceptionally well in this last matchup. Like, how challenging is the deck to play? And do we think we're going to see people making mistakes with it and maybe, costing themselves a few games that way?
Yeah, it's hard to compare it in difficulty to other decks because the skills that it's testing are so different. But those are often the kinds of decks where you see a lot of mistakes, even from like really well-versed tournament players, because they're practiced on specific things, and they're not always practiced on hand space control and using your resources efficiently in the face of that, or recognizing, oh, I don't need as many delaying tactics in this matchup. I can throw it away with a Crusader on board to draw, versus, oh, I'm going to need delaying tactics because it's tokens and they go wide. And when they have these 5/5 tokens in the front line, I'm going to need this in the future. Those sort of skills are really important with this deck.
Well, YuYu showed exactly how to play at an absolute clinic, and they are moving on to the semifinals. So let's go ahead, bring up the bracket, and take a peek as to what we have seen so far and what is yet to come here in the December OCC. And there we have it. So YuYu defeats Korngai 2-1. We are going to have Corg versus HQT as our next feature quarter final. Meanwhile, Yao Leu, Spoker, Bezio, and Pisutski are all playing off stream, and we will get you an update on those matchups as soon as we have them come through. So once again, congratulations to YuYu making it to the semifinals. Corn Guy doing a nice job, but unfortunately falling just a little bit short. So we're going to get lined up here for the Korg HQT matchup next. We're going to welcome Thanatron to the caster booth. Thanatron, I had started the show asking Berto and Starry kind of their experience with the World Championships. Obviously, you competed live in person and took a few extra days to enjoy the sights while you were in Iceland. How was your experience?
Um, really great, incredible, beautiful country. Very happy to go for the chance to go, and super happy to go as a competitor. Making a great loser bracket run was super intense. Having that kind of payoff was really nice. There was definitely a time where I was in that very last game, and it was, if I win this, I go to Iceland and have a mini vacation, and if I lose this, I get some diamonds I don't care about. So that's and the diamonds are great. I have my card backs that I like, so there's not much left there for me personally. So that was quite the intense day, and I'm happy that it turned out okay. But yeah, I wish I could have done a little better. I wish I maybe brought. I'm a long time Soviet Italy player, and I think that would have done me better. But hindsight's 2020, and the zero is my both favorite and least favorite card from here on out. I don't know. We'll see how I develop a relationship with the zero from here on out. But yeah, really positive experience.
Well, we're happy to have you here today. So let's get into our next matchup. We've got Korg up first. Let's get a quick run through of their deck lineup. Starry, why don't you take us through it?
Yeah, so Gork's first list is a push OTK list, but it's a little bit different in that it's playing Japan instead of the traditional Britain secondary. And additionally, it's not playing Great Patriotic War, which means if your life total goes too low, then I guess you're just gonna push OTK and you're gonna try and win off of value with the KV1 or the Coruscant or some other big hitter. But you do have the island defenses, so I don't know. We'll see how that works. Next up, we have a Britain US ramp list that is one of the few decks that has been able to keep up with this high roll list, especially running those 2 copies of Strafing. But I am a little bit surprised not to see any copies of the Glamour Voice, as I think that's a super good card against a lot of the meta at this current moment in time. But the Strafing it's a really great tech choice, so I'm sure that we'll see some great action with that if the high roll decks aren't banned. And then lastly, we have a Germany US ramp slash jet prototype list. We saw this at the World Championships in triple. 3 of the 4 competitors brought the exact same list, and we're seeing, if not the same list, a very, very similar list here. This deck is tried and true, and it relies on a mid-range game plan with a strong jet prototype finish.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Starry. Let's flip over to HQT's side. Thanatron, why don't you run us through this quickly?
All right, so we're starting out with tokens. We have our new token lists with things like Core Sun, things like um, Line of Engagement, the 2 new cards that are kind of bringing tokens back to the forefront. And then we have what is now very quickly become the classic swag high roll, war production, 4 swags, and 101, trying to make very large artillery with plenty of ground units to back it up. And then we see a pretty classic Jagro, with even including a single Akita, but 2 swags in that as well as the new Panzergren that can provide a 35T with a combined arms for a lot of instant burst. So really interesting to see this go up against this kind of lineup go against a lineup with 2 push decks. So very, very interesting matchup.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thanatron. Let's dive into the bands and see exactly what we've got here. So Gorka gonna go ahead and lose that Brit US ramp deck. And on the other side of things, HQT's losing Jagro. I'd also love to mention that, we are kind of skimming through the decks here. We do have a full breakdown of each and every deck on the pre-show, the War Room. You can go ahead and check that out on the VOD. But let's talk a little bit about the bands here. Thanatron, you mentioned the kind of classic Jagro side of things, and it's something that, we figured with the rotation, with the new expansion, probably wouldn't be quite as strong as it had been in the past. And yet here we see it get banned. What's your take on that?
So Gorky basically with the push lists is definitely running something that he feels Jagger can sort of go under with its speed and with the amount of damage that it can kind of do and damage it can kind of spread out. So I think that is a extremely logical choice. It did get worse, right, as it lost engines that it had before in recently losing Martyr, losing Feigned, and losing everything else. But we see this new Take Liberty card being run quite a bit. I believe there is some in HQTs as well. And the thing about Take Liberty is the new sort of draw engine is that it's also affecting your opponent's hand. And if your opponent's hand is this huge, big hand where they've been assembling combo pieces for their push, and then you're just like, haha, put all those back. That's rough. Very, very logical bans for our players.
And Starry, what about on the other side of things? Gork getting their Brit US ramp deck banned as HQT deciding they don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, it is one of the few decks that can contest the high roll, but HQT is playing the US ramp version of the jet prototype list, so I didn't really think that Brit ramp was going to be an issue, but I'm not really sure. Brit ramp does, of course, play some really powerful cards like production order and stuff like that, so um yeah, maybe HQT is worried about the suppression effect coming out from that B24J. I'm not 100% sure either way.
Well, we're gonna find out as we dive into our first game here of our second feature quarterfinals.
Yeah, so Goric is considering keeping both the Fifth Rangers and the Panzer Grenadier, which kind of surprises me because kind of like in the last game, I was expecting to see a mulligan for something maybe like war production, something that is a little bit more explosive, and especially against tokens, I feel
Yeah,
like contesting. Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I would definitely agree. So what we see from HQT early, we see a Red Dawn, which has been a recent splash for a lot of tokens players. I've even seen a lot of hammers being run in it as well on ladder for things like swag. So that will play probably a big part as well. I would say that this is not the kind of start that Jet wants to see against tokens.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Playing a raw 35T seems pretty disappointing if you're the Jet prototype player. But I think that Red Dawn is a super good tech because you're really looking to get this line of engagement down on an empty frontline turn 2. And if your opponent goes something like War Production into 64th Panzer Grenadiers and push on turn 1, that can be super hard to contest for the tokens player. So I love this Red Dawn tech. I think it's really strong.
And also interesting that Corg is not bringing Pindex, right? We see Pindex being used to a really nice effect so far in this tournament. And, somebody that I would say is very synonymous with that deck
For
archetype,
sure. For
not
sure.
using it here. I actually got to talk to Gorky over the week a little bit and kind of poke his brain about some of this stuff. And we asked him how he felt about sort of being the master of Pindex in the West. Like that's sort of how the West looks at him. And he said that he thinks it's funny and he's definitely finds it a point of pride. And he says, but maybe I'm a master of Brit deck. So I think that he wants to maybe be more known as a really strong British player than just a strong pin player. And I would say that's super deserved. But we also asked him about, there's certain cards like 3.7 anti-air gun, AA barrage, Welsh guards, cards that really did not see meta play until Gorky kind of brought them to meta, whether that was with a pin deck where the Welsh guards could shine or similar. And he said in his mind that these cards, you can often find difficulty in playing them in matches. But if a card has a very strong upper limit, even if it appears weak, there is still a chance of being brought into the meta, and I'll bring them into the meta in the future, which I thought was an incredible quote.
Absolutely
He sees
great
light
quote.
years
I
ahead of
love it.
me.
Yeah, I mean, Gork and Spoker were the respective opponents for Corn Guy and myself in the Nations Cup finals, US versus China. What an absolutely fantastic finish. And Gorky absolutely showed his prowess with British decks. I'm sure that that Corn Guy still hasn't licked his wounds enough after that. It was absolutely brutal. And I'm not trying to insult Corn Guy in any way, as Corn Guy is an absolutely excellent player, but Gorky just absolutely steamrolled. It was pretty brutal.
And
But
we
yeah,
spoke in the
Gorky.
beginning, yeah, about tokens kind of getting off to a good start. But tokens already at 13 health, and we do see a jet. We see that big Schützen sort of here, ready to try to contest this front line from all these tokens. So, really interesting spot in the matchup here, and also interesting. He, worried about the burst that tokens can have. So he is holding off that jet, which is really great as we see HQT's hand full of token burst. So really great play here.
Yeah, I mean HQT has the close combats, but I don't know, without some more tokens, I'm not sure how useful they are in this present moment, and it looks like HQT is just gonna go for the draw. Um, are we gonna see this 503rd double trade come out? If so, what is the follow-up for HQT?
Right, he's definitely going to be basically out of tokens. It was such a big swing on the last turn because if Gorky decides to go face with a jet and leaves HQT with 3 tokens instead of 2, There's so much more options with the buffs that he is holding in his hand. And then, of course, like we said, now that Gorky went more with a board control presence, HQT kind of lacks for tokens in his token deck, which is definitely scary here. He's going to get a jet to the face and all of his tokens removed. Corsun's going to be big here. It's going to be a big guard to deal with that jet, but it's going to come out for uh, a huge discount here, as the no surrender is basically going to make it near free.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that Gork identified that you absolutely have to trade out with the tokens, even if it's so painful to trade 4-2 and a 5-2 and a 2-2s. It's such a unfun trade to make, but it's absolutely necessary in that position, because if your opponent has the second close combat, which you know they have, it's an open decklist tournament, then you're just going to be completely screwed.
And
And
there's
we're gonna
that
see,
beautiful Yag Bomber right on time. And it's
yeah,
like we said, such a huge swing play between leaving 3 tokens and leaving 2 tokens. You know you have the resources to kill one with that Rangers not costing any op cost, but like that choice between, do I truly play the longer game and I limit him to only 2 tokens, or do I hit him for 7, which is such a huge amount, and then leave that 1 extra token? But Gorky realizing how much that 1 extra token can mean, playing the matchup extremely
mhm,
well.
yep. And it's worth noting, when you're playing this evens deck, you need to make sure that the odd cards that you play are worth potentially getting less damage on your jet prototypes. So you have to play the absolute cream of the crop when it comes to odd cards. And we see that Yag Bomber doing exactly that. One of only 2 odd cost cards in Gorkyu's entire deck. And that right there is exactly why it's played, securing Gorkyu the win.
And now we see HQT pivoting here, hoping for a high roll on his swag deck, trying to take this to a 3rd game against a bigger, heavier Soviet control. And he's got the war production into Panzergren start, not
Yeah,
into the swag, not the turn 1 swag. And
yeah,
again, we talked about the Red Dawn tech. Look how big it comes up.
yeah, it's absolutely huge. I mean, in this matchup, it's less so tech as much as it is a combo piece, as you are looking to try and combo it with push. And so you're only really going to be able to spend Red Dawns in one of 2 cases. One is that you're willing to use it on super key units, because you still have to have a critical amount of Red Dawns to push OTK later in the game. Or 2, if you're willing to sacrifice the OTK game plan whatsoever, just say, you know what, I am exclusively going to win through value. I'm going to use my course and use my KV1 1939 to win through value. And I'm just going to use these Red Dawns as removal. And that's also a super valid option. I was playing a very, very similar deck to Gorkyu last night, and I had to make that critical decision myself. So that is absolutely a game plan that you can do. That's the beauty of playing control combo, is that you have the option of going for control, or you have the option of going for combo.
And the 2 island defenses as well really speaks to that versatility, holding on to those already. So as the crazy damage can kind of burst out of this swag deck if it does roll high, being able to replace some of that health can be very key. It is looking good for Gorkyu at this moment.
Yeah, I am a little bit concerned though, because the Red Dawns, while acting as great removal, unless you're willing to spend the 4 credits to turn it into a From the People, they're going to be dealing damage to your HQ. And when your opponent is looking to high roll you, play Jet Prototype for 6 or 7, um, the Red Dawn, it's great at stopping stuff like 64th Panzer Grenadier, but less good the later into the game you get and the lower your HQ defense total gets. So what do you think about this, Thanatron, seeing this Petlyakov come down, even though Gork knows that it's going to die instantly. It's just going to soak up 4 damage. What do you think about that?
I'm fine with it because he's not playing Jet, right? This is Swag. So the pincers are the big deal here with 101. Swag in and of itself, no deployment effect. So if this was the Jet prototype deck, you definitely want to try to get a protected Petlyakov out to make those Jets come down. Well, I mean, they're just not going to come down, right? Nobody's going to play a Jet into a Petlyakov. It would be awful. It's coming down as a 1/4, and you're still losing all of those cards. Truly just a great counter for that Jet deck. But with a Panzergren already on the table for HQT, I don't know that there really is much deployment left in that deck to counter. So putting that Petlyakov down as a time saver, basically, you're not gonna give me a bomber. You're gonna take care of this, and you taking care of this is gonna buy me time. So
Yeah, it's really difficult to keep track between all of the decks playing War Production and then
yes.
going for the one of two options, either going for the Swag or the Jet prototype. So thank you so much for clarifying that for me, as I was completely under the impression that this was a Jet deck. And, just knowing that information makes me completely reassess this game. I think that if HQT doesn't have the Jets, I think that Gork has a really, really good shot at winning this game, because pretty much all the damage is going to be coming down through either like Swag 101 or this 20 Panzer Grenadiers, which Gork has already gotten rid of one of. So
We have seen a lot of removal be spent already without any swags coming down, and only one 101. So as this game goes on, HQT might have the opportunity to build his super arty of his dreams here to try to get out of this. But Gorky also holding those 2 island defenses, those are also really looming large. So it'll be really interesting here. Let me pull up Gorky's deck. I imagine he only runs 2 hammers. I'd be surprised to see a 3rd hammer. Yeah, so just the 2 hammers. And we've seen already, I believe, 2 out of 3 red dawns. So that is basically the vast amount of targeted removal. Obviously, the ISU in the deck as that final big board clear could be huge as well.
yeah, so Gork here is facing down a really tough situation. On one hand, you have these great cards like Bryansk, 845th, etc. But on the other hand, their value comes from their effects. And if you if you get those units suppressed by that swag, then that's going to be a huge issue for you going into the game. So Gork really needs to hope to draw something good off of this island defense. Um, Something that's going to take out that swag principally.
Yeah, using the hammers early, one on a Schutzen that had yet to develop, and one on a was it a Panzergren to prevent the ramp? I'm not. My memory has already failed me from just minutes ago, but those are really big plays. I think that in this matchup specifically, I would have liked to see him save those hammers specifically for the swag, because I think it's obviously the suppress is big, but this deck utilizes the swag's fury artillery capabilities much more so than it does the suppression. It's not trying to suppress guards. It doesn't care about suppressing guards if it can attack for 4 and then right after attack for 5 on the same turn, doing 9 damage, very early, just because of how the 101 can quickly make that card snowball out of control. So saving those hammers might have been a huge key. The suppress can even make sure that those infantry aren't even generating health as well for Gorkyu.
Yeah. I mean, it will take 1 damage. Actually, will it? Does it suppress before the damage is dealt or after the damage is dealt? I think it might actually be before the damage is dealt. So yeah, you can completely nullify your opponent's heal.
I believe
And
it will take 1 health, although it's obviously not going to matter here as we see him just get that last little bit of 9. I bring this up only because last night I paid a good bit of attention to the interaction between a recon, the Japanese infantry that draws. When you hit that with a swag, it does draw 1.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I
so it
would
should be the
assume
same.
that right would work. And it is interesting, right? Because the recon itself says when it is dealt damage, and the swag says when it attacks. And you would think that the attack comes before the damage, and therefore the proc would happen in the favor of the swag. But in my experience, that has not been the case so far. So now obviously that is extremely, extremely nuanced, specific wording. So kind of what can you do on behalf of the devs, but knowing how those very intricate interactions work out definitely can come into play and separate, you know, close wins from close losses.
Yeah, and we're gonna see the tokens versus push OTK control. And I think that a lot of this is going to come down to, does Gork have the ability to remove those tokens? So I'm looking over Gork's list right now, and Gork plays 2 copies of Winter Warfare. Unfortunately, Gork doesn't see either of them in their opening hand, but they do have 2 copies of Bloody Sickle, which at least for the time being is going to be quite helpful. And HQT throwing back their own Bloody Sickles because, of course, Gork isn't really playing anything worth using them on.
And he has that turn 2 line of engagement, which we've seen be so powerful for tokens getting off to a quick start. Tokens not before this Winter Warfare patch, I don't think anybody thought of tokens as a fast deck. But now with line of engagement and some of the tools it's been given, it can play pretty fast, faster than you might expect.
Yeah, so HQT has a pretty good opportunity, if not this turn, then the next, to play a really clean either 503rd or frontal assault. And we see Gork making a great play by pushing the 845th to prevent HQT from setting up a support line full of tokens.
Not only that, but the pedal Yakov also sort of looms well in this match, right? The 503rd motors are a deployment effect, and that is going to stop that. Really interesting for HQT to think that the guard is worth sacrificing this buff. Not going to get anything on this deployment effect, just throwing it out for guard
Yeah,
instead of throwing out tokens.
we're already seeing a really commanding lead from Gork here, especially with that Winter Warfare in hand. And as you said, the Pelyakov absolutely looms large here.
You can see him thinking about it already.
The one thing that you have to consider is if you play the Pelyakov, then your 39th Rifle Regiment is not going to get its deployment effect until the Pelyakov is gone. But having a bomber that's gonna eat a token every turn, and most notably eat a token through guard, is probably worth the you know mirrored effect that it has, preventing you from using that 39 to its full potential.
And as this matchup sort of plays out in front of us, obviously I don't know how much Gorky had this matchup in his head when he built this deck, but it almost seems like it is the like token counter that he could ask for, right? We've got things like confusion because the tokens are always going to be under 3 costs, so he's always going to hopefully be able to steal a token and bash it into another token, effectively destroying both. He's got the Winter Warfares to take out a bunch of tokens that haven't been buffed yet. And then even that by the sword, obviously there's not, a ton of good draw options for Soviet, but by the sword obviously can be super effective as tokens are trying to go wide. So if they're trying to go wide and you can draw big off of them going wide, that obviously is a huge play for the more control-based Soviet player.
Yeah, so you said yourself that in World Championships you almost wish that you hadn't brought tokens. And here we're seeing HQT in a pretty difficult position after they already lost 1 game on tokens this match. So my question for you is, HQT is the only person playing tokens in this tournament. Do you think that tokens just isn't as strong as people were expecting it to be?
I think it's strong. I just think it is teched against quite easily, right? Because of how uh, easy. I mean, tokens are a 1 cost unit, so they are susceptible to basically every removal in the game. Obviously, big removal to remove big things, you might have to wait for them to scale up. But a lot of the removal in this game, when it is conditional based on cost. And obviously, tokens being the lowest possible cost makes them get hit by everything. The moving the Padoyakov up is definitely a really interesting play. I guess he really wanted to be able to steal a token.
Yeah, it almost
So
seems like Gork was baiting it out, getting it destroyed on purpose to secure that 39th Rifle Regiment. And what a freaking tempo swing that is for Gork.
yeah, the 6/6 definitely out taking the much better token. Still holding on to that confusion though here as well, right? So if any of these won't come down with a buff, but
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to not see this come down one turn later and see a frontal assault with it. Especially when your
HQT
opponent has a
maybe
nearly full support line and is going to be able to trade out with the vast majority of these tokens. Definitely
right.
really surprising.
HQT may be feeling the how close he is to losing his grasp on this game and making a push for what he can maybe do to victory or death once again. And we're already seeing huge HQ damage from push and all of the tokens taken out in one fell swoop.
Yeah, so HQT is gonna need to start off with a bloody sickle, I believe. Unless HQT is instead planning to just do like triple light infantry motor. Or
Yeah, the
sorry, no,
guard
yeah,
would have been the
that
only
yeah,
thing that could save him, but
yeah.
with enough on the table, obviously the token that Gorku could steal would have gone right into the guard, and the 5 damage from Mr. Steal Your Girl himself. I'm sorry, I'll never remember the number of the actual regiment.
39th, yeah.
39th. I'll just remember my terrible nickname from a song from before most of the people that watch this game can remember.
I was gonna say I prefer your name for it, Thanos. So keep going with that. Um, Sorry, I wanted to ask you the question because you had brought it up a little bit during the cast that that push deck. It's so important to understand when am I going for my combo and when do I need to break down the pieces of it to be able to survive and win the game. And I think in this last matchup we kind of saw Gork go like kind of hybrid there. Like, hey, I don't need the full combo. I'm going to save a couple pieces to use push, and then I'm going to be able to do enough damage. Like, how critical is that to really be able to maximize the efficiency of this deck?
Um, I think that it's definitely something that comes into play in nearly every matchup, especially when you're playing the Japanese secondary because you don't have access. I'm very confused as to why Gork wasn't playing Great Patriotic War, but yeah, you don't have access to nearly as much healing as you would if you were to play something like Brit Ally, which is definitely the more typical version. So I think that especially when you're playing the Japanese version, that you need to be very, very careful about how you use your HQ defense total. And maybe in that particular list, maybe the push is really only meant for the control mirror matches. I'm not sure.
Spot on. And Thanatron, I want to touch on something around tokens because you had sort of mentioned that it's fairly easy to counter. And looking at HQT's token deck, you almost feel like he was trying to tech for the mirror matchup at the same time, like including the Bloody Sickles and Mr. Steal Your Girl and a few other things there. Like, is that possibly something that maybe watered down the deck a little bit? Because typically we see tokens just go all in on tokens.
Yeah, and it's really funny, right? Because we're just putting it in the contrast of how the versatility of Gorky's deck was a huge boon, and how it made him uh, favored, I think, in a lot of different matchups or a lot of different lineups versus what people are bringing. And then we saw that attempt at versatility for HQT kind of backfire, sort of what you're alluding to, and maybe sort of stretching his ideas a little too thin so that none of them were as potent as maybe they needed to be. Definitely hard to know what his thought process was, forming all that. Obviously, nobody looks at Bloody Sickles as a bad card, right? They're doing a ping damage, they're cycling a draw for you. Bloody Sickles definitely great, 9 out of 10 times, but Yeah, in that matchup, they definitely weren't too helpful. So it could definitely be that he tried to prepare for a mirror. Maybe he thought, tokens were really strong and he was going to see other token decks, or you know, either way, definitely worked out better for Corky this time around.
Absolutely. So we have our semifinals. They will be set. Let's go ahead and bring up the bracket and break those down for you, as we do have, I believe, the top two qualifiers here moving on, because we did have that shift in how you qualify for this event. So the top two players on ladder do move forward. The rest have to go through the qualifying phase. So there you see YuYu, who finished first on ladder, Corg, who finished second on ladder, both moving forward. We're going to have YuYu taking on Spoker in our first semifinal, and then you're going to have Gorkyu versus Bezio in our second semifinal here. These are following the same style of matchup. We are going to have Conquest. It is going to be a best of 3 with one deck band. Only the finals will be a best of 5. So let's dive in. Let's get YuYu versus Spoker going here, as we welcome Berto back with his festive toque, as we call them in Canada. Ready to go here. Let's dive into... What are you making that face for, Thanatron? You
I
gonna get a
just I
beanie?
learned I learned something. A Christmas hat. I thought it was just a
Oh, this
Christmas
is
hat.
most certainly just a Christmas hat. I'm just trying to poke fun at the, Canadian isms. You might call it a beanie in the US, you might call it a toque in Canada. Probably more so what you're wearing than what Berto and I are wearing, but I appreciate the call out there. Let's dive back into it. Let's take a look at YuYu and get a quick refresher as to what they are bringing for this semi-final. Berto, why don't you take us through this? Berto would be able to take us through this if he was not muted.
I'm sorry. First up, we have US Germany Frontline, and then we have the War Production Swag High Roll deck. And finally, we have the pin deck with Britain, Japan.
Awesome. We're seeing a lot of pin, seeing a lot of Germany here, and that front line has been getting some mixed results. But why don't we dive over to Spoker side? We did not see this individual play on stream for the first game, so Thanatron, I will kick it over to you for a quick rundown here of what they're loading in.
So the first deck we see is a German jet prototype. We see this is the Soviet variety, so not running the ramp and duress of the U.S. variety. Instead, we have things like 554th to try to take the front line for free and give yourself kind of the space to operate. And then a very interesting tech choice with line of engagement, putting some tokens on the board, kind of trying to do maybe the same thing as you were doing with 554th, but getting a little bit more value. And then we have a push OTK that looks more similar to maybe the push OTK that we're sort of used to seeing in this early stage of the archetype with Soviet Britain. And then finally, we have another push deck, which is similar to the one that we first saw in the World Championship, where we have a Brit Soviet version that has both the push combo and the Commonwealth, so it can reliably put out over 30 face damage. Extremely scary and something to look out for.
Thank you so much, Thanatron. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bands as we get ready for our first semi-final here. YuYu is going to have that pin list band. On a Spoker's side, one of the two OTKs gets knocked off here. Berto, let's dive in with you. We've seen this pin list, see some success so far. Any thoughts as to why Spoker would go ahead and ban this, considering they're relying on a little bit of that combo side of things? Might care a little bit less about units getting pinned.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised to see the pin list go when you're so combo oriented. I would have thought that that would be a really nice matchup to have your push OTK into, but maybe there's just a little trauma playing against that pin list. I know most people really do not like to play against it, and it can be a long, slow death at the end of those games.
Yeah, Thanatron, is that a similar thought on your side? Because, it feels like when you're playing against that pin deck, you do have to think very hard about your strategy and possibly make some adjustments. Though I do feel like if you're playing push, you're playing those OTK style, both high roll and frontline, which are you use other two decks are kind of quick.
Yeah, so it can go a lot of different ways, and it is definitely really interesting. And to piggyback on what Berto said, uh, if you're a guy who's playing pin and his whole deck is basically built to slow a board down, then when you're sitting on a push OTK style deck and you don't care about the board, not only does he not have much to do, but the hand size becomes trouble. There's not much for him to we're probably seeing a case of just throwing delaying tactics out just to get rid of them, right? So I would have expected to see that as well, as far as what Spoker was hoping to line up into. So really, really interesting. Corn Guy was the only Western player to bring pin. I do think that maybe the East thinks that it is a little better than the West thinks that it is currently. So that also might be playing in.
Yeah, I mean, we saw even in World Championship qualifiers, the Chinese scene playing a lot more of this pin deck. But to get into the game that we're in, this is looking pretty awkward for YuYu. Not a lot of value in that opening hand. Of course, the double war production is really awkward.
Especially going first, as you know, going first with this deck, even with a good war production hand, you can completely put your opening 4 card hand onto the board on turn 1 sometimes, or turn 2, and then basically be playing the top deck game for a while. So getting 2 of them going first can be super devastating, as we see already, as YuYu has no hand.
You see this line of engagement not really doing a lot here, giving some targets that this swag will have to deal with.
And I'm surprised to see him not move the Panzergren up. Obviously, the swag is going to take 2. Well, now it's only going to take 1 attack, but oh, right. Obviously, a Nakshub dollar is going to fund the second attack there. Very nice. But moving the Panzergren up would have put 2 units in the front line and made that maybe a little bit more difficult. Zerstorer really nice here. Obviously, Zerstorer does not care about getting suppressed. In fact, it likes to be suppressed. But that already is too big, and it could already be over.
Well, there's the Egg Bomber for Spoker here, which is really going to give him a chance. Because obviously, if this swag was uncontested, it's killing you in a couple of turns. But with the Egg Bomber here on 5, this is big.
Yeah, really great call, Berto, seeing that. And literally the only thing that is going to buy Spoker any amount of time here. And he's still going to have to deal with a swag coming back down. 2 units in the front line. Maybe not the swag coming back down. Obviously, the Ag Bomber would just trade that right out. But, oh, no, it does come right back down. And the combined arm's going to take out, yep, the Yag Bomber. So now Spoker right back into the same position, albeit with a much smaller artillery to deal with.
Yeah, and this is an interesting decision point here for Spoker. Obviously, you never want your opponent to have the swag on the board, so you can Panzer for it. But at the same time, if your opponent finds another 101st to buff this swag, you're losing your retreat to be able to deal with that buff. So it's a hard choice between the Panzer IV and the FW here, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And now that the front line is decidedly UU's, it can definitely get even more difficult. This jet prototype, though, is huge. We could see it take out that swag. Not going to be able to afford it, though, if he goes for a trade with the tank. And what's even more scary, I think, what's more frightening here is that none of us would have taken UU's hand as like a high roll hand. getting 2 war productions, being down to no cards so quickly. I wouldn't call it a low roll, but I wouldn't call it quite a high roll. And you can see that this deck is still just popping off. It doesn't care.
Yeah, his draws since that first turn have been absolutely insane. We do have this jet prototype to potentially deal with this the swag in the back line.
And it basically has to happen this turn, otherwise the jet isn't going to survive. And Spoker absolutely needs
Ooh.
some kind of value trade here.
Small
Oh, he
mistake from
sees.
Spoker. He did have the opportunity to give this Panzer 35T an additional +1/+1, which would mean it would trade with this 101st.
Yeah, that 1 damage could loom very large. But now the game's starting to look much better for Spoker's comeback chances. He
Yeah,
obviously
he's
doesn't care about that Panzergren, and that jet is fragile, but sitting okay right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of fast damage in YuYu's deck. I mean, it's not like he has any sickles in it, as that would be pretty counterproductive with the war productions. Not that I haven't seen a few psychos on ladder running sickle and war production in the same deck. But I mean, Spoker is being a little crazy too, running line of engagement in the same deck as war production. I'm also incredibly surprised by that.
Definitely some newer stuff. The 22 and getting a little bit of draw is definitely really helpful for YuYu. Obviously, he needs draw, but it is most likely too little too late. We see 12 out of 13 damage for Spoker already. Assumably going to grab another jet here.
Yeah, and that could be lethal if it is a 6 or a 7 attack jet prototype.
Yeah, that 554th does not have an op cost, so he can kill that without spending a credit. So he maintains the same 6. And we'll see him go for it here, a 6 or a 7.
And a very nice 6 attack jet to close out the game. That was cool from YuYu. You love to see it.
I'm sure a very heartfelt and genuine that was cool.
I'm always very impressed by my opponent's jet prototypes. They're always
Very impressive. One of the best emotes. Absolutely. So now we see Boker getting that win. So he is going to be on the push OTK. Do you feel that if the 2 OTK decks that Spoker brought, would you feel that the Soviet one was the one more worth banning, or that the British one would have been the one more worth banning in your eyes?
um I don't know. I've generally just been more afraid of Britain in this expansion, I suppose.
Same.
Like the Glamour Boys have been absolutely stellar. Um I'm not sure. Let me check how many copies of Glamour Boys Spoker runs real quick.
YuYu here playing a pretty regular U.S. frontline here as well. Much more calm and what we're accustomed to seeing up until this point. Not quite the explosive nature of a turn 3 or 4 giant arty or a ramp to jet, but still something that is very potent. We've seen plenty of blitzkrieg lethal in our time. Always something to watch out for.
Right. So Spoker doesn't run any copies of Glamour Boys. So maybe
Very interesting.
yeah, so maybe that's why YuYu was a little bit less afraid of it. I would put Glamour Boys as being really powerful against the two decks that YuYu is on. Um, but of course in some matchups you're not as worried about it.
And since he's playing US frontline, he doesn't really care. Like sometimes you try to maybe you think the push OTK deck is weak to your own healing, and that if you can get, comfortably above 20, that they're not going to be able to generate enough push. The British version is the one that doesn't worry about that, right? Because it has that Commonwealth and push to be able to put out a wild amount of damage and to be able to heal itself up over 30 to enable Commonwealth. And also, even if you don't get killed by the OTK potential, they can be very tough to get their health total down. So normally I would agree that the British version exists as a tougher matchup in my head. But when you have US Frontline and they don't have Glamour Boys and you have Blitzkriegs, then maybe this lines up even better. As we see how fast US Frontline on turn 4, reducing Spoker all the way down to 2 damage. Who needs a jet when you can just do this? Just do this.
Yeah, just use Old Reliable. I mean, Blitzkrieg, it's still one of the strongest cards in the game. Um, and now Spoker is not out of it by any means. But these are dire straits here. But this evasive action is probably going to be a big hit onto this fifth Rangers, I'd imagine, in the following turns.
Yeah, at least Spoker gonna get one thing to go his way here.
You can use one Red Dawn before giving up on the combo because Spoker runs 3 copies of Red Dawn in the deck. He does opt to use it on that Greyhound.
Double Red Dawn, double push is lethal unless they have healed significantly. So, man, staring down that front line, only 5 health. This evasive, like you said, is huge here. Now that the Sherman's been drawn, right? Because either uh, the Rangers comes down, and that's a bummer. It becomes a 4-op cost, 4/4, not great. But if he throws that Sherman down and doesn't get that Sherman draw off of the Sherman, and then can't find another Sherman, it could have been exactly what Spoker needed to get back into the game. So really nice for YuYu there. I would assume he would rather have the Rangers lose its deployment than that Sherman.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're so low on cards so quickly into the game. Now, on Spoker's side, what he's looking for, I imagine, has to be a Crusader. Um, because he is running out of draw quite quickly. We see the Pioneers come down, a very powerful card, but not really anything going on in his hand that the Pioneers significantly helps, and this M10 is coming down to suppress it anyways.
Interesting, as well as YuYu could have taken his draw with the Sherman and the 0-op Blitzer, but this puts him at a great spot as well. He's got 5 out of the 8 damage he needs on board and is still able to draw. It's not going anywhere. So
I feel like Spusher has to give up on the push dream at this point and just get it from the people, kill that M10. That special reinforcements might be the worst draw in his entire deck.
really, a lot of intrigue here as there are not many decisions to be made, but they are of maximum impact.
Yeah, I mean, you start to wonder, like, if I'm not killing my opponent with the push combo, am I really going to be able to kill my opponent with Commonwealth this game? That seems dubious as well.
It'd have been an all-time call out here for YuYu to target the Brit version instead of the Soviet version, knowing that he lines up so well into it, and we can just see US frontline going off like it used to.
And there's the Crusader, but all out of British orders in hand.
Helpful snowstorm for sure.
A Crusader, maybe just to bait out 4 damage from the Sherman.
Yeah, that Raw Crusader surely feels terrible. And things like Panzergren not useful here, or that 35T. Important to keep in mind that Snowstorm is affecting this entire turn regardless. So anything coming down will have, as you see, the Rangers, or I'm sorry, the Pathfinders had a brief moment of 4 op cost. So it is not something that you can ignore by putting out new units. It is a board state.
Yeah, which is something I overlooked when I first read the card. I was thinking like, what is this used for? It's like worse Scorched Earth, but it does have its own niche that it fills.
I've had similar issues as well because it being a board state, but not necessarily applying anything graphically to the table. It's really easy to forget that it is still present. You know, you just think that that is a thing that already happened, and the cards that are about to be played afterwards are not going to be affected, but they most definitely are. And here we see a very lovely exact lethal moving that Sherman to the front line and just grabbing the CA, not really worried about the 35T. CA goes perfectly onto that Sherman, and we have a tied match.
Right now it comes down to this push OTK versus YuYu on this sort of swag high roll, and I'd much prefer to be YuYu.
Absolutely. This is a slow deck versus a fast deck. And not exactly the sort of fast deck that the slow deck sort of techs itself against anyway. If that made any sense. That was a strange ramble. But I would definitely agree. Spoker is at the bottom of a very tall hill right now.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit about the strength of the Glamour Boys before. Was that one of the standout cards for you when you were seeing the reveals of the expansion, or did you find that in testing when you were preparing for the World Championship?
Definitely more in testing. I think when we first saw it, we were just like, all right, you know, a nice Brit unit that gives health to HQ. We've seen that with like Baluk, and this is obviously much bigger, and the guard is very helpful. But I don't think it really truly rung home how strong it is and how strong it is to take 4 of them until you really got into the testing and you really started trying to build any kind of slower Brit deck, and you're just like, you know what? I might as well just take the full stack of these guys.
Yeah.
Seaforth was nice, but I mean, now I have 4, and I'm generating what, almost 16 health, right? 4 per.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Uh, when it's already like a decently efficient unit, similar to the Japanese 4/7 guard, but just a little lower attack.
We see YuYu out to his turn 1 swag. The last thing Spoker wanted to see. Those red dons do not quite cut it. He definitely is wishing he had a hammer. Uh, I have to imagine he takes out this Panzergren. You maybe even knowing he's not going to pull off this Panzergren ramp. He just wants to see Red Dawns used.
Yeah, and he knows he doesn't even need to play the 101 this turn because he has the Jaeger Regiment in hand, so he's able to surprise Spoker with both of those powerful cards.
the best turn 4 that this deck can basically ask for.
Yeah.
Spoker
And
taking a lot of time here, and good on him for doing so, as it may not look like it, but this is quite the impasse of how this is going to turn out.
you could Red Dawn push if you really wanted to. You're really scared of that. Oh, looks like he might be doing it.
And we
He's
see it.
thinking about it.
Yeah, definitely a good call by you, Berto. It is important to remember that push can attack anything. People think of it only as an OTK tool because that is what, when you read the card, seems like the most obvious use, but there is definitely bailout potential with that card as well, which speaks to the versatility of the Soviet deck we saw in our last match as well. Double swag.
Now that's surprising to me.
I
Because we
also
were
would have thought
talking about that's like, the best turn you can have on turn 4 for
to just,
YuYu with the
develop that big gun. I would agree, but perhaps thinking ahead, and I'm gonna put 2 out. You're gonna take out 1, and then I will buff the one afterwards because you have hopefully spent your removal, and we can see Spoker using the honey offensively to try to get one of those swags killed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and good on him for it. I mean, that's one of these swags dealt with, pretty much. Oh, YuYu actually deciding to buff the lower defense swag rather than the
Greeting
higher
out
one.
reading out to make sure that he has 2 viable guns. Very, very interesting. And brings up the point of how annoying the swag deck can be, because one of the better anti-aggro tools that the game has maybe ever seen, something like supply shortage, where it's doing 1 damage per turn, does not matter when you are possibly getting +2/+2 every turn. You're not really worried about that 1 damage. You are outrunning it, no problem.
Yeah, but at least for Spoker, he has these pins, which really synergize well with the supply shortage. And YuYu doesn't have any way to kill this Crusader.
And we could even see the second supply shortage to ensure both of those guns are gone. I would not be surprised at all. Yep. Oh, and a great, great find there to put off that Schutzen. Monsoon Rot, very good. He's going to need to find the third supply shortage, though, to really make that Rot super effective. The Red Dawn play, very interesting.
Again, Spoker only on 3 copies of Red Dawn, and he's now used 2, so the push OTK is no longer viable.
And he seems a far away from a Commonwealth victory. As we said, this was going to be an incredibly daunting match to try to pull off as Spoker. And that is being illustrated before our very eyes.
Yeah. Spoker can fortification. He has 2 more fortifications left in the deck.
And once again, that evasive action, great against the Jet deck, not really doing anything against the Swag deck.
Good against 20 Panzer Grenadier. Really good against that card, but apart from that hit, there's not too many that you're too excited about.
Definitely true that new Panzergren has a very powerful deployment effect, but as you said, only 2 of them. So
Yeah.
and it is
Kind.
currently going around as a very fun swag tech choice. I'm sure if you have played some British players and you are playing, I'm sorry, not swag, if you are playing Jet on ladder and you have run into a Brit player, there's a good chance that you might have gotten evasive actions, and you could get mad, but you're the one playing Jet, so tip your cap, move on.
Yeah, I I thought a lot about about evasive action in Britain because of these jet decks and 20 Panzer Grenadier being all around, but it seems so hard to fit into a lot of these British decks because like here Smoker's running timely supplies, and running timely supplies and evasive action in the same deck is pretty awkward. It can also be pretty awkward to have evasive action in a combo deck because hand size can become an issue in some games. Same with the pin deck. So it's a really powerful card in this meta game, I would say, but it can be hard to fit it into a lot of these pre-existing decks.
Finding that supply shortage, I believe he plays 3. That is the third out of 3. I will check that real quick for Spoker, but that is a huge deal to pair with the Rot. That is a board clear, and all the way back to 20 health for Spoker as well. So starting to not look necessarily in his favor, but certainly better than it was looking 2 or 3 turns ago.
Yeah, it's starting to look like maybe this Commonwealth will actually happen. Or could actually happen anyways.
So he does run 4 supply shortages. So there is 1 supply shortage unfound still in Spoker's deck, and then 1 in his hand, and 2 have been used so far. So something to pay attention to there. That is the only Monsoon Rot. So he only plans on needing the combo once, and he is holding it. And that board clear, like we said, going to loom very large as he continues to just snowstorm this board, slow it down, let it get wide, set up for his giant board clear, and try to find this Commonwealth damage.
But enemy contact means that he might be milling a card here, which is a little scary. You could lose a push, but I think even scarier than that, you could lose a fortification.
And he finds the fortification. Second supply shortage, and yeah, he's just going to put down the second Crusader just to not mill. Obviously, the second supply shortage and the fortification would have just caused more draw than being British orders, so he's got to play that second Crusader. I don't know that it'll be a problem.
That is a very interesting bug. The auto canone
Cannon at
going
5.
to 5 attack because the snowstorm set it to 4 despite the Jaeger regiment reducing the cost, and going all the way up to 5 from the snowstorm effect. That's really interesting.
And if he wants to take out one of those... No, yeah, chooses to go face, recognizes the Commonwealth damage. At this point, you probably happy to let both Crusaders live, as Spoker is the one trying to play around his own units so that he is not overdrawing or losing anything here. This is not that big of a board to Monsoon Rot. If it comes down now, it's not going to feel that great. A lot of draw in Spoker's hand too, not even with the Crusader, just the raw draw.
Yeah,
Filling up the latter half of his hand.
maybe you can lead with a fortification, but I think that's his last fortification. I don't know that there's any healing left in Spoker's deck to speak of.
Playing tactics could be pretty big here. He might mill again, unless this evasive goes off.
Which we don't see any deployment
Yeah.
effects in YuYu's hand yet.
No, just pincers and card text. So this is going to be a mill for Spoker as well. And he needs that 5 health. Gotta imagine this is where we see delaying tactics. And the naval power, 4 of the 5 health. Not what Spoker wanted to see. At this point, he knows his only chance is Commonwealth.
Yeah, I mean, he can deal 2 damage, bring your opponent to 18, but that still leaves YuYu uh, at Gree health above what he needs. Because Red Dawn double push is 15 damage.
17 out of 20 is not going to win you a game. So that is a very keen point. Really thinking his turn out here and just decides that there is no out. YuYu takes this set. Spoker pushed up against the wall and says, I have better uses of my time.
That was a rough way to see that one end up.
It felt like a tough back and forth too, and just that was kind of similar to what I was going through my head as I was watching this. To your point, Thanatron, is like, how does he win this game? Sure, he can hold on and he can sit back, he can try. Like, does push even really get him there? Does he have enough to slow his opponent down?
I don't think so. No, I think once the push OTK combo was gone, and you're playing that sort of hyper aggro deck that can, turn 1 swag, turn 4 double 101 hit with the swag, multiple swags, multiple 101s. It's going to be super hard to pull that Commonwealth damage off against a player of UU's skill level. Just knowing I've got burst, I need to make sure your health doesn't go over 30. I've got the tools to do that. So, good luck. And we stated, I think, right from the jump that that match was definitely in UU's favor. And I think 90% of the match, we saw exactly why.
Absolutely. And now, Berto, we've seen the high roll deck do well. In that series, we saw the jet deck do well. On this Germany side, do we think that there's one of these two lists that are maybe slightly better, or is it very matchup and player reliant?
Well, I've played a fair bit of both on ladder, and it is really hard to tell which one's better. Certainly there are matchups where the swag is really good, like against tokens, against Alpine, and there are matchups where the jet is kind of unanswerable, like against self damage. And it's really hard to weigh those two options and say which is better, but undeniably both are insanely powerful.
Absolutely. We're going to see a whole heck of a lot more Germany in this meta. Let's go ahead and bring up the bracket, though, as we have our first finalist and we get into our second semifinal here momentarily. So we do have Spoker losing to YuYu, going down 2-1. Spoker walking away with 150 USD and 375 diamonds. A little bit of the tweak that we are seeing now with this kind of new setup. Third and fourth place are walking away with the same prize. There's no third place match. So YuYu moving forward to the grand finals. Winner of that will take home 750 USD. Second place gets 450. But we've got Gorkyu versus Bezio here up next, and we're going to load Starry back up and have her join us here as we get into our second semifinal. Welcome back, Starry. Let's go ahead and dive into a quick refresher of the deck list here, as we've got Gorkyu up first. So let's go ahead and bring those up. And Starry, you can walk us through what their deck lineup looks like.
Yeah, so Gorkyu's first deck is a sort of Soviet Japan push OTK list that also just plays a lot more control elements than the typical push OTK list, and really has the opportunity to go either way, either towards this OTK win condition or just trying to win through value. The next deck that they're playing is a Britain US ramp list with the strafings specifically to deal with the swags. You can also use it to pin the front line, but oftentimes you're going to be playing it specifically for the swag. And then lastly, we have this sort of Germany, US jet prototype list that we've been seeing a lot of recently. A lot of players are bringing it in this tournament, as well as 3 of the 4 players in the World Championship. But this list is pretty homogenous at this point. People have figured out what's good, so not much reason to, to go through the individual cards. But
Perfect. Thank you so much, Starry. Let's go ahead and flip over to Gorky's opponent, Bezio, and see what Bezio, who just narrowly missed out on a qualification for the World Championships, here coming back with a vengeance in this December OCC. Berto, why don't you give us a run of Bezio's lineup?
Right. So first up, Bezio has this Japan, Germany, Jagro list. They also have a tokens list, Soviet US, with the War Machine. And then they have their War Production, Soviet high roll list with the swags over the prototype.
Right on. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bans here. As we dive into that, we're going to see that once again, that Brit ramp deck is going to be banned. And once again, we see Jagro banned. This is not the first time that we've seen Jagro eat a ban. And it is also not the first time we've seen this Brit US ramp eat a ban either. Um, Starry, any insight onto why this Brit ramp deck is once again going to get banned?
yeah, I'm again not really sure. On one hand, it is just a really strong deck, and it plays some very strong cards. But I would think that with Bezio's lineup, especially, Bezio has a lot of aggressive decks in both the high roll list and the tokens list and the Jagger list. So I'm really surprised to see that the ramp list of all things was the one that got banned. um, you would expect that something that has a little bit better matchup against the early game would be what you'd see get banned. But clearly, 2 players now have assessed it as a serious threat. So, yep.
And on the other side of things, Berto, we got Gork who's going ahead and banning the Jagro list. With that push OTK ramp being a little bit slower, probably trying to avoid what is possibly the most aggressive and quickest deck that Bezio's bringing.
I guess so, but is it the quickest deck? I mean, this high roll deck, it can get out of the gate so fast, and it can be so scary. I I'm surprised to see Japan Jagro banned twice here, uh, in both times we've seen it. Because if people are so scared of this Jagro deck, then why aren't more people bringing it? You have to ask yourself.
And I think that Thanatron kind of alluded to that as well, where like, yeah, it's quick, but is it really the best deck? And I think, we just talked about how strong Germany is. The high roll list can go pretty bananas if you get a good opening hand. Tokens is not nearly as slow as it used to be. So we're going to find out if they made the right choice here as we get into a Germany mirror matchup here in our first game of our second semifinal.
Yeah, so we're gonna start off with the Jet prototype, or sorry, not Jet prototype mirror, because Bezio is not playing the evens deck. We're gonna see Jet prototype versus SWG, probably the 2 scariest cards in the entire format right now.
Yeah, and Gork does find a duress for this SWG. Um,
Yeah, as well as the war production into the 20th Panzer Grenadiers. It looks like a really, really solid start for Gork, especially going first.
Ooh, and the double war production. You hate to see
Yeah,
it.
not much you can do about that. If you're going second and you draw it, it is what it is. But just having one oftentimes, even if you do have a second copy, just the ability to play at turn 1 is so strong that sometimes it doesn't even matter that you're not getting your most efficient draws all the time.
Yeah, that's a 3 in 35, I want to say, to draw that war production. Starry, quick, simplify that fraction.
Yeah, I think it is 3 and 35. That is not a perfect fraction, but yeah. So, anyways, Bezio, although he has this SWG, what are you even gonna hit with it, right? I mean, Gork is gonna pretty soon play a Panzer Grenadier or a 3H, and in either of those cases, the minute that they hit the field, they've gotten all the value that they need. So on one hand, Bezio has an absolutely fantastic start, but on the other, SWG is just not that strong in this matchup.
Yeah, and I mean SWG, it's not a complete dish all on its own.
Yep.
It really it is so powerful because when you buff the attack on a Fury artillery, it is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's not really that the card on its own is just straight up broken. It is broken in combination with other tools.
Yeah. And Bezio had the opportunity to go for the Jaeger Regiment last turn and greed and hope for the 101st Infantry Regiment, allowing you to go crazy on turn 3. But Bezio made the right choice. He only drew a Panzer 35T, and thus it made more sense to play the 64th Infantry or the 64th Panzer Grenadiers. So Gork already has a pretty huge credit lead here, and is gonna quickly start hitting the board with the 20th Panzer Grenadier, with the Schutzen, and might even be able to get into that back line with the buffed up Panzer 35T that's gonna come down from that Panzer Grenadiers. So on one hand, Bezio needs to contest the front line, but on the other hand, that plays right into the hands of the 20th Panzer Grenadier and the Schutzen with the Blitz. So, if you're Bezio, what would you do here, Berto?
I'm I'm not sure. I guess this is his best option. I mean, maybe you can trade with the Panzer 4H instead, just so that your artillery is a little more protected on the back line, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it's a
um,
tough position for both players, really, because although Bezio, Bezio can push the front line very easily here and prevent Gork from dealing with that SWG for a long, long while. But on the other hand, that does kind of use up nearly all of Bezio's resources, and then the question is, well, now what?
and here's Bezio's sort of interesting take on the deck, running the SU as another powerful threat to run out on turn 1.
Yeah, I ran into Bezio yesterday on ladder, and he played the SU against me, and I was like, wow, this is a really interesting choice. I mean, it is a strong card, but we mostly see it in these self-damage lists that are relying on getting that damage to HQ as a good thing rather than a bad thing. And I quickly dispatched it, so I didn't think it was the best choice, but he did end up winning the game. So, how critical can I be really?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the type of answers your opponent has. Against something like a lot of Britain decks, if they're not the push variety, it can take a while for like a supply shortage to get through it, and that can really clock your opponent for 15 over the first 3 turns potentially.
hmm And this Schutzen is so valuable, being able to trade away, deal 3 damage, and heal itself up. Schutzen is an absolutely magical card. However, you really are looking forward to dealing with something bigger than a 2/3, but you still can't complain that much, as getting a fresh 5/5 while destroying a unit and dealing 3 damage to enemy HQ is quite strong.
Yeah, and I think Gork was 1 credit off of killing that swag that turn by playing one of these 2-drop infantries and trading out the front line and doing Panzer 35T plus um, combined arms. So that's a little bit unfortunate for Gork, I suppose, that he was just slightly off of that. But
Yeah,
uh,
and Bezio recognizes here that Gorg has to trade out with the SU, and so you can just force through that damage to the HQ and not really worry about the Schutzen. However, that that sneaky Fallschirmjäger allows Gork to super efficiently trade out with the SU and immediately follow up by taking out that SWG with the Panzer 35T plus combined arms, just like we talked about earlier.
And if this was the jet prototype list from Bezio, Gork would be pretty scared. But without much more burn damage left in the deck from Bezio, Gork's sitting fairly pretty here.
Yeah, and I'm surprised to see that Gork still hasn't drawn into a jet prototype. Not that he particularly needs it, but definitely surprising. And Gork just
Ooh,
goes for the damage throw on the HQ, knowing that as the game progresses, a jet prototype is going to be enough really to finish Bezio here.
I suppose I did lie a little bit about Bezio not really having much burn left because there is that comet. Gork is at 9, so that's a 3-turn clock. However, if he goes for the comet this turn and finds a war production, that would be lethal.
True, yeah, you'd be able to combine it with the 101st Infantry to get that last extra point of damage, but I think there's really only one play to be made here, which is play the Comet, attack the HQ, and trade out that Schützen. It's going to be an absolutely close race, and every single point matters here. Calculating exactly what your opponent has the capability of playing on each additional turn is absolutely crucial. It's positions like these where tiny differences in play decide games.
And I think this might be a little more reasonable for Bezio here. Presenting lethal on board, of course, Bezio was probably thinking he was going to die this turn. A good chance to the jet, but fortunately for him, Gork has not found it.
Well, I would actually beg to differ, because if you're Gork and you play the FW, that almost signals that you don't have the jet prototype, right? Because if your opponent's at 10 and you're playing an FW instead of a jet prototype, especially when you have the front line, when you have a super commanding hand presence, like, I don't know. I think that Bezio's ability to say, yeah, my opponent doesn't have it is pretty strong. Like, I think the probability that your opponent has it is pretty low in that position.
Maybe, but at the same time, it does. You can conceal your motives a little bit and
True?
guarantee that if your FW stays on the board, that you have lethal next turn.
True.
Whereas the other way around, if your opponent's forced to deal with the jet prototype, then the FW coming down doesn't, kill your opponent.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good point. And Bezio
So,
just doesn't have what they need to deal with this entire board. So Bezio's gonna have to pick and choose here. How do I establish a board while also not dying? It's a really tough position.
yeah, and they will die here to the 35T, but I think this probably was the most reasonable play to simply hope that your opponent doesn't have 2 points of damage and setting up lethal for next turn.
Yeah, and what a close game. Bezio was gonna win the next turn with a Comet plus the 101st to deal exactly 5 damage.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely crazy close game. And I mean, these Titanic Germany decks that are just so powerful. I can't believe we're not seeing Germany getting banned more often here.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I was about to say, I can't believe that Germany has won nearly every match that it's been in. It's by far the most played ladder deck right now. And it seems like that's what everybody's teching for. We see all these copies of Red Dawn, even in stuff like tokens. We see um, the strafing coming out from Gork. I mean, people are teching so freaking hard against these Germany decks, and to see nobody ban it is so bizarre to me. It seems to me that it's a lot easier to just ban your opponent's Germany deck than it is to like try and find tech cards in every single deck that you play.
Yeah, or you'd think some people would at least go into the tournament with that strategy, uh, rather than, teching against it. so hard.
Yeah, and it looks like Bezio is saying, I don't need the high roll. I'm just gonna play Nashib or even risk the Geberg's Pioneer, but I do think that's a little questionable into a deck that is playing Bloody Sickles.
Yeah, it's always so hard deciding whether or not to keep Geberg's Pioneer, because into Soviets, I mean. And ooh, this is a fast start for Bezio, but you're out of gas so quickly that it's not looking great.
Yeah, I wonder if there's ever a world where you slow roll it so that you can get an earlier FW or jet prototype, or for example, this Panzer Grenadiers, right? I think that there's definitely some. It looks like Bezio is potentially feigning the countermeasure, the non-existent countermeasure in their deck.
Sorry, Bezio, you have insufficient credits to play that card.
Yeah, I mean, Bezio, like I was literally just saying, had the opportunity to slow play it, but decided that going for the Nashiv into 35T was the better play.
This Yak is going to get some draw. This Corson is likely coming down for 4. Ooh, or even the Bryansk plus 845 to get an even cheaper Corson later on.
So I know we already talked about it a little bit, but how do you feel about this choice of playing 2 copies of SU on Bezio's side?
I feel like it's a little vulnerable. Um, I I don't know. There's like it dies just as easily to the Red Dons as the 64 Panzer Grenadier. I don't really know that you need more copies of good things on Bree when you already have 2 copies of swag and also auto canona. It's it's not really the pick that I would go for. But I don't think it's like terrible or anything.
Yeah, I mean, you do get to high roll and hit your opponent for 5 on turn 2. You get to turn 1 war production SU, turn 2 push up and attack HQ, but I don't know. I don't know how good it is. Like you suggested, I think that it's relatively easy to counter, whether it be through a Bryansk or a Red Dawn or um, your opponent potentially high rolling an autocanona, something like that. So.
But one thing I do like a lot is this Yak 7 in Gork's push OTK deck.
Mm-hmm.
It has gotten him so much value already.
Yeah, you got to be careful when you're playing Japan secondary, and really your only sources of healing are the 1-cost elite engineers as well as 3 copies of Island Defense, because Island Defense is not nearly as much healing as a lot of its contemporaries, but Yak is hard to pass up on. It's so valuable that even though you are going to take some damage off of it, it is so strong.
And that damage can be beneficial with your pushes.
True. Yeah,
Because
it could be that 2 extra damage that you need.
yeah, I'm looking at this hand from Gork right now. So he would have 4 damage plus 3 is 7 and then 10. So he has 17 damage from hand next turn. And the SU coming down from Bezio. This is lethal from Gork if he sees it.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy that for only 7 credits on turn 7, a freaking control combo deck is able to take out Bezio. And we see, I mean, as we said earlier, the SU dealing 2 damage to HQ it's you're not playing self damage. It's definitely, it's securing the win here for Gorg. This tech choice for Bezio is really coming back to bite him.
Now, will he calculate the 1 damage from the Yak? Oh yes, he's already hovering
He
over the red
already
dome.
sees
He
it.
sees it. Gork
And
is a
here
master
we
of the
go.
OTK.
Gork is moving on to the finals with a quick 2-0 over Bezio. Oh my gosh, a turn 7 push OTK. Have we ever seen a combo deck combo that fast in OCC history?
I don't know. Maybe way back in the day with autocannon
With a
OTK. I
baby
don't know.
combo?
Yeah.
Wow, what an unbelievable push OTK. Whew.
Berto, I feel like you've been lying to me. You just told me how great these Germany decks are, and then push OTK just absolutely wipes the floor. What the heck happened?
Well, Gork is the master, of course. He's the master deck builder. He's the master OTK player, the master combo player. And you know, even though Germany is so powerful, I, you know, Gork. That's all I need to say.
I mean, I think that is perfectly acceptable with Gork going on to the finals. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the bracket. Right after the bracket, though, we're going to have a little special something for y'all, as there were a few photos taken during the World Championships. Most of them involved a green screen, so we're going to have a good time with some of those. But there you have it. There you have the finals are all set up. So you got YuYu defeated Spoker in the first semi, going into the finals. Gork in the second, 2-0 going into the finals. What is interesting about this is YuYu finished first on ladder. Gork finished second on ladder. These are the only two players who got to buy into this event. The rest have to go through qualifying. So really interesting that we've seen these top two players going all the way. So gonna be a phenomenal finals. The winner of it will take home $750. Second place gets 450. Third place and fourth place below both split a 150 USD 375 diamond prize pool. Let's go ahead and welcome all three of our expert panelists back on here, because we've got some fun for you. And I think, Starry, did you want to add something before we got into this, or did you want to save that for
No,
later?
no, but I'd like to say that our skill set as expert cards analysts also makes us expert card meme analysts. So
Excellent. And I mean, personally, I don't know about myself as an analyst for actual cards, but a meme analyst, now that I can do. So Marky Mark, what do we got? Hello, Mr. Burrito. The sexiest man alive, people man of the year, Berto Burrito. I mean, Berto, do you have like an acceptance speech or something prepared for this?
No, unfortunately, I have nothing prepared. But I don't know what I can possibly say to this
all
individual.
I can say is that I gotta get to page 25. Like I'm
Sweet
I'm there.
smoldering superstar.
I mean, that is quite a smoldering look right there.
Yeah, people man of the year. What an accomplishment.
Combined arms spoos. Maybe April Fools this year we can get a little spoos snuck into the combined arms card. I mean, the thing I want to add is I think based on what Twitch chat was saying during the event, Spoos has one too many buttons done up on his shirt.
Yeah, with that chiseled German jawline. Never asked Spoos what he was doing between 1939 and 1945.
I think combined arms may also have been referring to the two guns he's packing under that shirt.
I love this picture. Um,
What
Leo
I,
making sure that he knows how to play the game before competing against J King.
I have to. I don't know who published this how to defeat J King download guide, but I feel like it may be a bit incomplete. Somebody needs to go back to the drawing board on this one. Thanatron, did you get access to that guide before your match with J King?
I did. It said to just stop the plane, and I didn't have the resources, So once he got to Iceland, it was
It's just game over. And apparently this is
through
how he
legal
got to
means.
Iceland. This is how we
Yeah.
got Dyson hopping in a Jeep and heading on over. Just absolutely steamrolling the competition. This is awesome.
No, I didn't realize that J King was actually an immortal being and has been alive for over 100 years.
I mean, he's just had a lot of time to practice cards. He was actually around, when these actual units were in existence.
That's how he does it. The secret
That's how he
comes
does it.
out.
I mean, Thanatron, I have to kick this one over to you. I think from a musical standpoint, this is kind of your jam.
No. I review this album 0 out of 10.
Oh gosh.
Wow.
Poor review
Wow.
from me.
Tough
J-King
critic over here.
taking his well-deserved break from cards to start a thrilling rap career.
I mean, with the 6 Gs on that war bond. um, there we are. I did study health sciences in university, so maybe this was just me putting those skills to the test in a very very old school kind of way. It looks like we're having a very in depth conversation, though, Berta. Do you remember what we were talking about?
No, but we look very sophisticated, don't we?
It's been a long time since you've had that conversation. It's no surprise that you forgot.
This should be actual card art, I think. This should be the one that gets snuck in because I think new players will go years before they realize. 'Cause this one's just so well done. This is the new art for supply shipment.
I'll take that all day long. Aileen, if you're around and listening, get this one in the game, please.
uh,
I don't even know where to go with this one. Anybody else want to take this one?
I mean, I'm not sure where the meme started of cards fans thirsting over spoos, but definitely using the opportunity for this meme contest to take full advantage of the inside joke.
I know. I think I won't say it started at the last World Championships, but I know it's been in existence for at least a full calendar year because there were comments during the 2022 World Championships. So they just continued it on. Spoos. You mentioned earlier, Starry, Spoos is ageless. I mean, he looks freaking ageless. I think he's the. I, I was gonna say he was the daddy of the casting crew, but that probably comes out wrong based on this meme.
Oh no.
That's a yikes from me.
Yeah. I appreciate the peanut gallery, Thanatron. You're just sitting back like, no, please stop.
J King's rap career, taking it to the stage, going for those rap battles.
I appreciate that he's wearing the lucky pineapple shirt during the rap battle as well. I think you got to stay on character and on brand here, and I think he's done that quite well.
Yeah,
I've
I wonder what he has in that diss track.
I've often thought there are many similarities between J King and B Rabbit from 8 Mile. Very similar personalities, similar characters, similar arcs, if you will.
That
So
underdog story turned into that championship reign.
in this meme based on the Last Supper, we have every single caster and player in the that was at World Championships, save for one. Actually, wait, never mind. Leo's there. He's. I never noticed Leo when I first saw this. I was gonna say, Leo was the one painting it, as Leo is named after Leonardo da Vinci.
Oh, interesting. Interesting little tidbit you snuck in there.
Yeah,
This is my favorite one for sure.
he painted himself into the painting. Good for him.
I just appreciate that somehow I'm holding the world championship war bond. I'll take that. It's my crowning achievement there. And here we have the Weezer Blue album, which, to Thanatron, your point earlier about things that have happened before most of our viewers were probably born, this may also be one of them. I don't know the exact date on this guy, but it's been a minute.
Berto looks perfect here. Berto absolutely looks like he is a part of Weezer and should be like something
Honestly,
about the sweater. It's impeccable. You
absolutely.
could put the rest of whoever was in Weezer beside Berto, and it would look still fantastic.
Yep. I 100% concur.
And Bubbles too. Like maybe it's not the Weezer look, but I feel like that could be absolutely like a British boy band look of some sort. Got the hair for it, the little smirk on his face. Could totally pull it off.
I think
And
Bubbles
there you,
might have entered this one. If I had to guess, I think this might have been made by Bubbles.
Bubbles
Yeah,
taking home the entire prize pool.
the Photoshop job on Thanatron, I think, is the best one. Getting that beard in there.
If I didn't know any better, I would say that that is a real person.
Yeah, his head is a little bit small, and there's some shadows on the face that don't match the lighting source, but otherwise, it really looks quite good.
This is thoroughly impressive. Great job by everybody who submitted those. I believe it was in the Cards Discord. I think Aileen mentioned that it's going to stick around in the Discord for a little bit as well. So if you are not done messing around with our ugly mugs, then feel free to continue to do your thing, and maybe we'll showcase those at a later date. But yeah, that was a good time. Thank you all for doing that, and that's the perfect segue into continuing on here into our grand finals as we're going to have YuYu taking on Gork. So that was not expecting that. Bye Berto. Thank you for everything. But phenomenal job by Berto and everybody else today, obviously. But let's get into this, right? We got YuYu up first. Let's take a quick peek at the player who finished first on ladder, who will be fighting here for the grand prize of 750 USD. Starry, why don't you take us through these three decks? There are no bans. They're bringing all three. They've got to win with all three. Conquest format, best of 5.
Yeah, so YuYu's first deck is a frontline list, and it seems like frontline has kind of fallen out of favor because it has a difficult time contesting the 64th Panzer Grenadier, especially after a war production. But we've seen YuYu absolutely dominate with this deck, going for some of the fastest wins in OCC history. Next up, we have this very threatening German Soviet high roll list. And this one is playing the one with lots of odd cost cards, taking full advantage of it by cutting the jet prototype, going for that swag into the 101st Infantry Regiment. And then lastly, we have a Britain Japan pin list. And we've seen YuYu pilot this deck absolutely masterfully, taking full advantage of force surrender and all the new cards to win through just dealing damage over several turns, not even necessarily going for Commonwealth.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Sorry, let's flip over to Gorky's side and Thanatron. Give us the run through.
Okay, so we start with Gorky's Soviet Japan list that we have already sort of highlighted on this stream with some very interesting choices, including a take liberty to try to control his opponent's hand size as well as generate some draw for him, and then just highlighting that it is very versatile between a push combo and just sort of having some very high value Soviet stuff. And then we move on to a which one is this? This one must have been banned the first time.
Mm-hmm. And the second time.
We have a Brit ramp here. We have the an hour of needs in the war machines, some classic US ramp added to a very heavy Brit Commonwealth shell, and some naval power and some strafing there as excellent tech choices for what's currently going on, including destroying swags. This deck, now that it is best of 5, is definitely going to see play, so those strafings could come up huge. And then we have a German American, very standard at this point, jet prototype deck. Only basically the Yag Bomber and a Noxshib as odd cost cards. Big jets, duressing your guards, gonna hit you in the face very fast. So we are used to seeing it by now, and it's gonna be quite the lineup here against YuYu.
Thank you so much, Thanatron. So once again, all of these decks are making it through. It is going to be best of 5. Players are going to have to win Conquest style with each one. And now, sorry, I've asked you this question a million times, so I will spare you today. around this ramp deck, and I'll get Thanatron's 2 cents because I feel like I keep asking Starry why it gets banned, and she is at a loss for words at this point. So Thanatron, we're gonna finally see this ramp deck go through. We're gonna finally see it played. The only we've seen the Jet prototype before, we've seen the pin happen, all this kind of stuff. Like, why the ramp deck, and how do you think it fits into this meta?
So I think maybe you could be trying to ramp over. I mean, ramp is usually played as a control counter, right? You're trying to ramp over a control deck. And the control decks that we see right now run a lot of push and become combo focused as well as being control, which isn't something that I think that ramp likes to see. So it definitely is an interesting choice. I know that op cost ramp with Vic March or Victory March rather provides a lot of health and draw, and I think that the health is really key. Obviously, Britain can provide health itself, so any kind of Brit ramp. So I think maybe it's just sort of something that goes in line with I have these aggro decks coming out against me. I want to play something that's going to generate me some health, and maybe if I'm doing that, I might as well ramp as well. But it is definitely a interesting choice currently in this meta.
Well, let's find out how it performs as we get into our grand finals of the December OCC.
So YuYu's going to be starting off with a turn 1 Gebirgsfener, and that's going to raise the question for Gork. Do I duress it to prevent that early credit lead? Or do I let it go and save the duress for something a little bit more threatening? If you were Gork, what would you choose, Thanatron?
On turn one, I would absolutely like he's going first with Gebergs, like I'm taking that dollar away. But to your point, there are definitely really awesome things to take out with the duress. My favorite is Skytrain. I love
Mm-hmm.
duressing a Skytrain and just being like, that's now just a really annoying unit for you, and it's great for me. So, uh, and here we see maybe trying to bait it out. YuYu not putting his Gebergs down on turn one doesn't really feel like he has a good 3 cost turn two. So he'll just take the 35T that he could have afforded no matter what, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of makes sense for YuYu because if you're playing against Gork, there's a certain sense of finality in Gork's list. If you play this game out on turn 12, Gork is going to be hitting with these crazy jet prototypes and trading with Schützen and really, really making Frontline's life miserable. So YuYu, instead of going for the early ramp play, is just making sure to get as many units into the front line as quickly as possible, and then hopefully drawing into some more stuff with this 22nd.
And likely going to get his Sherman on turn 4 with an extra credit to spend. And yeah, here comes that duress. Even on turn 3, we're still taking the money away.
Yeah, and YuYu drawing a Blitzkrieg, on one hand, it would be really, really nice to get it out and could very quickly finish Gork off. But when YuYu has so many infantry, Gork is going to be able to contest that front line with Rangers and Schützen, and we might not see a good opportunity for Blitzkrieg for a long, long while.
And you can see here he is playing for it. He's not taking his Sherman draw. He says, I have units, I have Blitzkrieg, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah, Gork is going to clear 2 of the units, but YuYu is still going to be able to hit for a potential 8 if they so choose.
Interesting that he takes the buff out now. I would have expected to see the 22 draw boy as, basically the first selected target, probably for the Schützen. And then I would have thought maybe the 1-3 before it took that buff for the Rangers, therefore a value trade, leaving 2 1-1s on the board. That is kind of how I would have played those trades. So interesting to see here. Something about a 2-4 Greyhound seems so much more annoying than a 1-3 Greyhound.
For sure. Yeah, and I would love to see the Blitzkrieg come out from YuYu, and it's for one reason and one reason only. YuYu has 2 copies of Hellcat in their hand, and Gork is probably not going to be able to contest the front line for that long, if at all. So I think that would have been a really good opportunity for YuYu to get in a Blitzkrieg, but instead YuYu is going for the draw and going to extend the game out a little bit longer. Are we going to see YuYu do a repeat of last turn, pushing up the red devils and then Shermaning again?
His hand size
Or
is pretty good. I think I would like to maybe see some sort of Panzergren turn here.
yep, that's definitely an option.
Instead, yeah, goes right back with that Red Devils. I mean, putting a 4/4 tank that can affect the front line, especially when you're holding your Blitzkrieg, is definitely not a bad play. I would assume at this point it's the Panzergren seems like a weirder play here, but you got the 35T, and you have that big combined arms.
If Gork can manage to get this Leopold down, it's going to be super, super good for him. Leopold on turn 10 would allow Gork to push a bunch of stuff into the front line and probably secure a 2-turn clock.
He
So
has a
Gork
jet.
has,
Sorry, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, yeah. I mean, he has a jet, but that does mean that if he plays it, then he wouldn't be able to take out the Red Devils and is a little bit weak to Blitzkrieg.
This is actually exactly the line that I wanted to see from Gork, saving the jet for later, taking the value trades, and then spending that last 3 of 7, getting something in the front line. I don't think that he thinks that the Panzergren is actually going to go off. Rangers and numerous other things can take care of that, but it allows him to next turn possibly do Jet and Yag Bomber to face, which is going to be brutal and set up a lethal that I don't know Frontline is going to be able to deal with. And that Blitzkrieg looks so far away now.
Yep, especially if Gork is able to push up the Schutzen. It is definitely, it's being able to use Blitzkrieg is quite an elusive prospect at this point.
That M10 effectively doing nothing, just being played as a 4-2 body.
Yeah, I mean, what else do you do if you're YuYu? You have to get bodies down on the board, and especially tank bodies are more valuable.
Interesting here that Gorky does not take the 11 to face. He instead chooses to make a valuable trade, his 5-1 into that trade, clearing the way. So now it's just the jet. Some players, I
Yeah,
think, would have definitely gone full send there and just, especially with another jet and another comet in hand, and said that you will not be able to match this. But Gorky playing around that Blitzkrieg, knows M10 being a very fast 1-op cost tank, can only take that and maybe a Hellcat, and suddenly your 13 health does not exist.
yeah. If Gorkyu's next jet prototype doesn't hit a Nashib, then Gork has a guaranteed 2-turn lethal here, even if YuYu trades away everything that Gorkyu has with the combination of jet prototype and then comet the next turn. But YuYu is starting to set up for this this Blitzkrieg. Let's see. So the Hellcat plus the 99 is 6, plus the Red Devils is 7. That would be exactly 13 damage if Gorkyu doesn't kill this Red Devils here.
But he kills it, deals a very healthy 4 damage to put his final jet into killing blow range.
Yep, it is still a roll. Jet Prototype has the opportunity to hit Nashib, I believe, but it is more likely to not hit Nashib than it is to hit Nashib. So it is highly probable that Gork just wins right here. And even if Gork doesn't win right here, then the Comet next turn will finish it off. So Gork actually looking for the Nashib, I believe, with the Panzer 3H.
Trying to ensure the victory, but he
Mhm.
will get it anyway. It's a very educated play, I think, trying to ensure victory in that way, knowing like you said, the only way that Jet is not doing 7 is with a Noxship draw. First, I definitely was confused as to what he maybe had been drawing for, but yeah, very big brain play.
Yeah,
Corq,
I'm not sure if it actually increases your odds at all, because even if you uh, draw Noshib and then uh, it essentially just moves the top 3 cards of your deck to the bottom, and whether or not you pick Noshib doesn't actually matter. You could just as easily pick something that isn't Noshib, and Noshib still gets sent to the bottom. So I actually don't think that it increases your odds at all. Um, but yeah, uh, he might have believed that searching for the Noshib was the best play.
of course, coming from a big contingent of very strong players in China, and talking to him this week, I did ask him sort of who some of his favorite players are, and he said Tang Tang right away. That he is a big fan. He said he is an opponent but a friend, and we like to discuss how to maximize the strength of a deck and a lineup. So I'm sure you know, even when Tang Tang isn't in these tournaments, he is still present. The same way that a lot of the Western players work together. Of course, J King and Berto being longtime practice partners, both extremely skilled. Obviously, Team Heavy tries to help each other out. So really good to see as well. Uh, and a pretty nice start from US Frontline.
Yeah, for sure. It is really, really strong start. And YuYu has the opportunity for going for either a Skytrain or a Sherman. I'm not sure which one is better on. I think probably Sherman makes more sense, as it allows you to search for a Blitzkrieg, which is
With
probably
only
going to help
7
you.
health left as well, the Sherman representing,
Mhm.
you know,
4
lethal in
damage,
and of
yep.
itself here.
Yeah, and Gorkyu is getting a taste of his own medicine. Gorkyu always seems to be able to high roll the opponent super, super well, always drawing kind of exactly what he needs. I would say that one of Gorky's best strengths is as a mulliganer. I think that he is extremely skilled in the mulligan stage of the game and often wins games really quickly off of strong, strong mulligans. Um, but Yu is kind of giving Gork a taste of his own medicine here.
Also interesting how this set is sort of lining up, right? We definitely, with no bans, we did not expect Gorkyu to struggle to find a jet win, and we probably did not overall for the whole set expect YuYu to struggle too hard in finding a US frontline win, right? So both players playing very good, very confident decks that they know that they can win with, kind of getting them out of the way. And this is probably going to come down more to the pin decks, more to the combos, to see who can sort of pull off that less conventional win to sort of take the entire set.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. But anyways, Gorkyu is in a position where they're pretty much forced into playing these fortifications and trying to make it to turn 9 to play a supply shortage monsoon rat. But after that, where do you go? If you don't draw the cards that you need, you're probably not gonna have a great opportunity to play this convoy anytime soon. And so Gork is looking a little bit low on value here, just using the fortifications to stay alive.
And probably wants to, well,
I would think that taking out the
maybe,
Red Devils and fortification would be the best
right.
play, but um it does lose to 35T Blitzkrieg, I believe. But I think at this point, when your opponent has 3 cards left in hand, you don't have the ability to play around something like that.
Instead, just draws and then throws the health up, which is very interesting. I could have seen him pin the Sherman and then, uh, well, no, 2 Red Devils. He can't really get a second attack. Red Devil's really coming into play here with that extra cost associated.
Yeah, I'm really,
Does
really
pin.
surprised to not see the Sherman, or sorry, not see the Sexton take out the Red Devils.
Yeah. Big combined arms.
And after the Sexton is gone, Gork is still a turn away from playing the Monsoon Route supply shortage. So it looks like Gork is just gonna go for like a double pin here. Draw some cards off of it as well. Maybe look to even try and find a triple pin, as I believe Gork does play 4 copies of that naval power. Now, why is it that Gork? Oh, the reason that Gork pinned specifically that one is because he couldn't spend the 2 credits to pin the Red Devils. I was a bit confused about that for a second.
Yeah, and basically no difference. The the Sherman costs 2 to operate, so might as well choose the cheaper option. But man,
Yeah, Gork is
Blitzkrieg
playing
could have.
into this huge Monsoon Route supply shortage, and Gork single-handedly turns this game around right here.
Yeah, only 3 cards. Well, 4 obviously with the draw. Uh, yeah, really is gonna want to find one of those Blitzkriegs. He's got small blitzers.
Yeah, I mean, talk about being good at surviving with Britain decks. My only concern though for Gork here is that I'm not sure if surviving is enough, because as far as win conditions go, you have Commonwealth and then you have these B24s that are going to come off of the production orders, of course. But aside from that, what do you really have as far as win conditions? I don't think you're going to hit Commonwealth this game.
Getting Skytrain seems strange. You could at least save yourself a damage or the potential blitzkrieging of one of those units, one of those Greyhounds, but doesn't want to take the damage from the Skytrain that it is receiving from the Greyhound buffs. Got another supply shortage here. That's going to be double supply shortage on quite a few of the units. Should kill both Greyhounds, and then the single supply shortage take out the Draw Boys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gork has managed to turn this around, and that delaying tactics is going to be so good later.
And the strafing really has a use here. There's obviously no artillery in U.S. frontline, and he is running those for the swags. But this, kind of deck gets a lot of mileage out of just pinning the entire front line, which is the other option strafing allows. So
Yeah,
a
you
lot
know,
of versatility again.
this is the first time we're getting to see this deck in action, and I think I might have misread this deck. I think that this deck might more so be a pin deck, opting for US secondary than it is really a ramp deck. It plays a lot of the elements of pin, playing stuff like delaying tactics, and using strafing is a really strong pin card. You are losing out on force surrender, and force surrender is quite the card in pin, but you are making up for it with additional win conditions as well as ramp. I mean, I don't know. I think this is a super creative list by Gork, and Gork is the self-proclaimed master of Britain lists. So this is an absolutely fascinating deck to watch. Going for
Yeah,
the
now
HQ.
going after face, as there's still some supply shortage damage here on the 3 units, leaving him with only a 1/1. That Sherman is huge. Blitzkrieg is huge. Probably not too many cards left in UU's deck, so he's kind of bound to draw these things now. And a
Yeah,
4th setup for Gork to try to deal with.
yeah, Gork doesn't have the option to play Suisse like the Japanese secondary pin lists have. And so instead Gork is kind of forced um to find other ways to pin the front line, like potentially strafing.
But this could be 14 out of the 18 that was required here by just pinning the entire board. Oh, the Hellcat. Hellcat is going to be able to combine with Sherman to at least kill the bomber. If he tries to play into this blitzkrieg, he is going to get ultra'd, so it's going to definitely matter
Yeah,
where
without
YuYu
the ultra,
decides
that
to
was gonna
spend
be
this.
lethal.
So YuYu
Oh
believes in
my
the ultra,
gosh, YuYu playing it
plays it
safe.
plays it correctly for the situation at hand.
Yeah, and if YuYu didn't kill that bomber, then Gork was gonna have exactly the credits needed to attack, production order, play another B7 or B24, and attack again for lethal.
I assume we have to see delaying tactics with a pin of one of the tanks. A little dangerous to do that here. It's possible the Hellcat could go all the way back to hand if he delaying tactics. Looks like he's not going to delaying tactics for that reason. No? One of those is going back to the hand. All right, and it's the Rangers. I would have liked to see the pin come out last, right?
Mm-hmm.
As that was a really unneeded risk. But the Ultra still again looming very large. At any point, if you thinks that he has this with that Blitzkrieg, he does not.
Yeah, and this is gonna secure the win for Gork here. There's no way that YuYu is gonna be able to prevent Gork from playing this B24J. And YuYu is back against the wall, going up against the community champion Gork.
Just a matter of bombers and pin. Just absolutely swept that entire game away.
Yeah, so YuYu needs to win 3 games against this Soviet Japan push OTK. And I definitely think that both the US and the Jet prototype have more than enough aggression and power to fight through that Soviet OTK, but I'm not sure that Pin is going to be able to do it. I'm really,
Yeah,
really concerned about the Pin matchup into the Soviet OTK.
it'll be really interesting to see how YuYu plays this. As you said, they have a great chance of forcing a game 3 by just powering through their 2 really good, strong decks here that have at least a good matchup, if not a favorable matchup. Or if they choose to just say, you know what, I'm not winning this set without winning this exact matchup, pin into this deck, so we might as well get it out of the way. But we see sticking to US frontline, confident that they can get that US frontline win that has eluded them so far. Definitely likes Geberg's turn 1.
And Gorky making the same play that Corn Guy did, which is to get rid of that that
That's
early that early Geberg's Pioneer. And the question is this gonna come back to bite Gorky as much as it came back to bite Corn Guy?
Gorky may be thinking, I bring that card mostly for tokens. This isn't tokens, so fine by me. And
Yeah, and
US Frontline's most hated card, the wanted poster in the bar of every US Frontline player, a guarded Pedoyakov.
yeah, the outlaw itself. And YuYu is just off to such a slow start that Gorkyu has a really, really nice chance of being able to uh to contest this frontline deck. But I'm very surprised on Gorky's side to not see the
Yeah,
uh the Pelyakov being the one guarded.
I wonder if that is a slight misplay just due to speed. It doesn't look like UU is going to be able to punish it, but with a Hellcat in hand and 5 credits, that was very close to being something extremely punishable. I have to assume that we'll see the 5-2 traded into the 2-3, generating 5 health for Gork, and then sneaking that Pedoyakov back into the comfy confines. If you're going to kill both, yeah, take the health first. I think Gorky sees that as well. If you're going to make the trade, might as well maximize the health value. And now he is back at home. Pedoyakov safe and sound. If it was a misplay, no one will ever know.
Yeah, so YuYu has the ability to push up this 1/1 infantry unit to get a trade off on one of the Bryansk regulars, as well as potentially suppress the other Bryansk regular. Or wait, no, you can't suppress
No,
the other
the
Bryansk
M10 is
regulars
just
because
as
of the
worthless as the half track now,
yeah.
unfortunately. It is the same old story of US frontline relying on deployments for all of its goodies, which is great when it works and terrible when it doesn't. I have seen a US frontline players working in a duress or two, which is a very smart tactic. Also, Vicious Salvo, which is not currently seeing a lot of play, but can also work very well in these situations to get out some suppress and damage. And
Yeah.
remember, folks, ladder's not an open deck list, so they're not going to be playing around Vicious Salvo.
Yeah, and I remember when you were preparing for World Championships, I believe you said that you thought Vicious Salvo was super, super strong.
We do, yeah. Team Heavy does think it is very strong, except of course in an open deck list, right? When you're
Mm.
playing against Leo and Socialist and J King, three top players, they're literally all they're doing is looking at the deck lists the nights before. They're going to play, and Vicious Salvo, when it is not getting generating that max value, feels very, very bad. But in the latter sense, I think can be extremely good. And obviously, even playing around it, Gorky would have had to maybe only singly guard the Pedoyakov. Otherwise, he would be playing into it. So even in an open deck list format, right? Knowing that someone has to play around something is also to your advantage.
Yeah, and something that is worth noting about YuYu's deck is that they are not playing any copies of Strategic Bombing, nor any copies of Eagle Day, sorry, not Eagle Day, Eagle Claws, or Stars and Stripes, which means that YuYu has no order ways to get rid of any of Gork's backline units. So it's going to be even more challenging for YuYu to try and push through these guard units, especially after Gork drops his Corson. And
And I
YuYu's hand
believe,
is huge, completely
and
full.
Gorky also holding a Depths of Winter, meaning that even if he somehow loses his Pedoyakov or the board starts to tilt against him, he can say, all of your wonderful, large US frontline units with all of their cool abilities and card text, they're all just tokens now, and I don't care anymore.
Yeah,
We've seen
YuYu
that,
has managed to break through all the guard units, but it's going to use the vast, vast majority of YuYu's credits. And, oh, interesting.
just needs bodies, needs those Shermans down as bodies. Also doesn't really need to draw, so two pushes starting to loom very large as well. If Gorky can simply draw into his Red Dawns, that he can end this game that way as well.
Yeah, so on one hand, Gorkyu has the ability to play Depths of Winter, Winter Warfare whenever he wants, which means that any kind of board that YuYu establishes is potentially dead. And it looks like Gork might be going for it now, but the problem with this is that once that Petlyakov is gone, YuYu's hand is gonna pop off. So
I
Gork
don't
does
really
need to
understand
be,
it now when you can take out that 6-2 Sherman with just using the bomber as a bomber.
yeah,
And then there's not that much in the front line. I would have liked to see at least another turn, because the worst case scenario there for Gorky, right, is that Corson dies and then he takes out the Pedoyakov. Not that he does HQ damage, but like you just killed your own Pedoyakov anyway.
yeah,
So
and
not to question Master Gorky, but I believe that might have been a turn premature for my tastes.
yeah, and Gorkyu has to either save these pushes for the OTK combo, or you can use them as removal. But if you do so, then you're completely abandoning any hope of being able to go for that OTK. And those island defenses aren't going to draw you any cards. So Gorky is in this position where Yuyu is going to establish a huge board here. And then what? I mean, I don't know. In my eyes, I don't think that Yuyu's board was anywhere near scary enough to merit using that Depths of Winter.
And a single Blitzkrieg draw wins the game with a 35T and a Greyhound in hand and 2 units in the front line. I'm not doing that much math, but it's probably around 23.
Um,
It's got a 99th, add 2 more damage on top as well.
yeah, if it's gonna be really, really close to 23.
We could see that M10 come down to take the health giving properties of the newly unrotated 2-3. I'm sorry, I've been avoiding. I don't know the health boys. That's exactly what we see. He's not going to be getting health off that card. Now he has the 99th buffed Red Devils sitting big, expensive to attack, the 4-4. And I think that this is over, and I think that it might be over for Gorkyu.
Yep. So YuYu is going on their way to try and reverse sweep Gorkyu. I did calculate it. YuYu would have had 20 damage if they used all their credits as efficiently as possible and drew a Blitzkrieg.
So not
So it
quite
wouldn't,
there.
yeah, it wouldn't have been quite enough. And Gorkyu has to do anything they can to hang on here.
And that suppress doesn't seem like a lot, suppressing the 845th, which is the health boys, and everybody knows it's the 845th, including me. But that really looms large. That could have been
Mhm.
a good chunk of health. That could have been extremely helpful. And YuYu is not even going to need to find a Blitzkrieg, it does not seem like.
Yeah, so Gork is gonna take this 35T here, trade it off with the 5th Rangers, and then trade the 2-3 into the 4-2. But YuYu will still
And grab
have
some
Blitzkrieg
cards.
lethal if they can
Winter
manage to find it.
Offensive? So Winter Offensive would be 4 damage to both players, and then with push would be 7, and then with another push would be 10, but that would be 6, and that would only be 10 out of 12 of Gorkyu's health. So it's also too many credits to do in one turn, and now he's not going to have the health to do so. YuYu definitely playing around the push play by making sure he does not have enough health to do anything crazy with that.
Yeah, it seems pretty over for Gorkyu. You do have the island defenses to delay the inevitable, but I just don't think that it's gonna be enough.
And a nice board clear, but
YuYu
probably too
almost
little too
certainly
late.
is going to search for a Blitzkrieg here. They play 2 copies of Blitzkrieg, but still have not managed to find any in like the top half of their deck.
Yeah, we must be getting close to the top 2/3 at this point.
Yep. Yeah, I mean it would be a 75% chance to see one of your 2 Blitzkriegs in the top half of your deck, and it would be an even larger chance to see one of your 2 Blitzkriegs in the top 2/3 of your deck.
We can see him take out Pathfinders here, although that wasn't a huge problem. A good hammer on the Sherman. He's buying more time. But again, no matter how much time he buys, how does he win at this point?
I have no idea. And YuYu is going to be able to completely nullify the effects of that engineer with that M10. I think that Gorkyu really just needed to not play that Depths of Winter at that time, and things could have turned out way differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Gorkyu has a second Palyakov, but without a... Oh!
Is this enough? He only needs one? To steal it? Yeah, he only needs
yeah.
one. With 1 health left. A single health left, enabling him.
Wow, I did not expect that, but Gorkyu 3-0s YuYu for
Out
the
of nowhere,
OCC
after
champion.
completely looked like you brought that back. Completely looked like the Depths of Winter play was going to be the linchpin of the entire thing, and a single top deck. The 2 different health yielding units were suppressed by YuYu, but the one play where he uses the confusion to take the 35T, puts down his own engineers, and then the next turn those engineers get suppressed, that 2 health off of that play is the only reason push OTK was OTK, that push was able to work there. That's incredible.
That's twice now that Gorkyu made an absolutely crazy play. I mean, we saw when Gorkyu managed to push OTK on turn 7, and then on this, we managed to push OTK from 1 life, seemingly on the brink of death. I mean, if Gorkyu didn't earn this championship, I don't know who would.
Takes the
Truly
win.
stellar play.
Absolutely. Takes the win in the first game, sure. Second game, YuYu comes out swinging with frontline, gets Gork down to, I don't know, 5 health, 6 health, something like that. Gork stabilizes, comes back, wins. Push OTK, frontline again, comes back. The Petlikov gave him some trouble, but pushes, and all of a sudden turns it around with 1 health left. So yeah, I think Gorkyu definitely deserved this one. Starry, you made mention that Gorkyu's the self-proclaimed Brit deck building. I don't know what exactly he called himself. Can you elaborate on that? I'm curious now.
I don't know. That was Thanatron interviewing Gorik.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
I would like to say that he definitely did not say that. I called him the master of pin and said that that is how I think a lot of Western players look at him, and he graciously said that he would rather be known as a master of Brit decks than a master of pin decks. So I do want to make that very clear. It was a very gracious comment. I did not find it to be like a self-proclamation of any sort, just that he would rather be known more as someone who plays Brit extremely well than something as specific as Pin extremely well.
Yeah,
But
and
I'll go ahead and say that he's the master of both. That's fine.
yeah, and before we end here, I want to make point to say that Gork brought a pin list with US secondary and a push OTK list with Japan secondary. And so both of these decks are pretty well established in the meta at this point, and we saw them many, many times today, but we never saw them in this way. And so I'm curious if Gork's performance here might cause us to shift these strategies into different potential ally nations.
something I think we see from Gork a lot is shows up, does really well for a little burst, and then kind of disappears for a minute. And I wonder if it's exactly what you're talking about, though, Starry, right? Gork sees something that isn't established or figured out in the meta. Gork shows up, kicks everybody's ass. People look at it and go, wait a second, he's doing some cool stuff. Let me steal all his ideas and do it well. And all of a sudden, he's competing with other lists that are, very similar or taking advantage of the same opportunities or gaps in the meta that he distinguished. So I think Thanatron, you mentioned, or he mentioned to you, he'd rather be known as the master of Brit, but I think he's done a very nice job of being able to kind of pick those gaps and those holes out to say that, hey, I see something nobody else does. I can build a strong deck around that. And it takes other folks time to catch up to him.
A new patch is Gorky season every time, and then we'll remain that way, and we're better for it.
Mhm.
Could not agree more. Could not agree that this is a hugely, hugely well-deserved victory here. Let's bring up the bracket and take a look at our final standings here today. So we did have the lovely first seed versus second seed make it to the finals. We had the very minor upset, but Gork absolutely demolishing in that grand finals to win this one. $750 in his pocket. YuYu taking home $450 for second. Third and fourth, in this case, Bezio and Spoker both getting 150 USD and 375 diamonds. Fifth to eighth also takes home some diamonds here today. But heck of a series, heck of an event. Huge congratulations to Gork. Huge thank you to a phenomenal casting crew here today. Thanatron, Starry, Berto, all of y'all did a phenomenal job. So just a shout out to everybody, and enjoy yourselves. Have a wonderful, happy holidays, and we'll see y'all for the 2024 competitive season.